Okay, Matt.
All right, thanks. So I will call the meeting to order at 7:01. This is our regular meeting for September 9, 2021. And as usual with the virtual meetings, I'd like to start with just some simple rules. This is obviously it's a web-based call. So the session is being audio recorded, just like all of our other meetings. But in this case, it's also being video recorded. To ensure sound quality, we ask that everybody remain on mute unless you are speaking, and then obviously please unmute yourself. And when you are speaking, to those who are not members of the commission, please, in this instance, both say and spell your name. And there's seems to be a lot of interest in tonight's meeting, and I think that there will be some divergent views and opinions. So let's all please give each other the benefit of being able to say what we want to say and not speak over each other. And also let's, at a certain point, try not to repeat the same ideas. Everybody will have a chance to speak, but at a certain point, it won't do us too much good to hear the same opinion over and over. So the commission members will generally keep their video on and their audio on throughout the meeting, unless there's some feedback, and we'll ask them to turn it off. And the members of the public, if you are speaking, please turn your video on if that's available to you. So with that said, I'll call the roll, and unless there's we've got a full team of members tonight. So that's myself and Daryl and Mark and Wes and Adam and Alice. And we won't elevate any of the alternates to voting status. And I'll move into agenda item 3A, which is the reading and approval of the regular minutes from August 12th, 2021. So I noticed a couple of typographical errors. So I'll go through those quickly now. There's nothing of substance that I'd like to change, but on page 5, in the third paragraph from the bottom, the last sentence begins with the new entrance. So it says the new entrance to the building will not be in the rear, which is closer to the parking. I think that we get rid of the word not. So the sentence reads, the new entrance to the building will be in the rear, which is closer to the parking. On page 6, in the second to last paragraph under 6B2, last sentence, it starts out with the brewer would be closed. I think that should be brewery. And on page 8, second paragraph, last line that begins with great. I think that great needs to be grade.
Where was that again, Matt? Page 8, second paragraph?
Second paragraph, second line begins with great.
Yep.
And that's all I have. So hearing no further discussion, I would look for a motion to approve the minutes as corrected.
I'll make that motion that we accept the meeting minutes as you corrected.
Matt, I wanted to say one thing. I just got on. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Ann.
I just wanted to clarify.
And just give me just 1 second, okay? There's a motion on the table. We should have a second, and then we can hear your comment. All right.
Second.
All right, that's a second from Daryl. Okay, Ann, go ahead. Sorry.
All right, it was about the minutes, but I just wanted to clarify what I tried to clarify last month. And in the minutes, it said about my question about the community center being used as,
Jean and James DiMartino.
Joined the meeting.
the community center being used as a place for pop-up galleries. And my question was not about competition for the other galleries in town. It was the fact that there's no parking there. And I don't think that was made clear.
Okay, so let me just get my head around that procedurally then, and let's call the vote for the motion that's on the table. That's been moved by Adam and seconded by Daryl regarding the minutes from our last regular meeting, which was, I believe, August 12. So all those in favor, so signify by raising your hand and or saying aye. Aye. Motion carries. Okay, so Donna, with regard to the minutes from the previous meeting of July 8th, how would you recommend we go about addressing Ann's comments?
I don't know if she wants to send an email explaining what it was that she really meant. I'll attach them to this month's minutes.
I will do that.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, good. Thanks, Ann. Thanks, Donna.
Sure.
Then the next item on the agenda are the minutes from the special Planet Conservation and Development Subcommittee meeting of August 26, 21. And I just had one quick correction there. Donna, on page 1, under new business 3A, in the second bullet under the first section, which begins with some of the census.
Okay,
That should be data and not date.
okay.
And from the balance of the members of the subcommittee, are there any other comments? Then I would look for a motion to approve those minutes as corrected.
So moved.
Thanks, Adam.
Motion.
Thanks, Karen. Any more discussion? Then all those in favor, so signify by raising your hand and or saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, great. Agenda item number 4 is public communications oral, and I want to make it clear that this section here is for anybody to comment on any agenda item that doesn't happen to be a public hearing. So during a public hearing, members of the public are invited to speak. If it's just these meetings are public, but we generally don't invite public comment unless it's a public hearing. And I know that there was some disappointment that that people weren't allowed to comment on the club getaway discussion at our last meeting. And I just want to make that clear that now's the time that if anybody wants to make any comments regarding anything that's on the agenda, that's not a public hearing, now's the time to do it. I don't see anybody. Donna, did you see any raised hands?
No, I do not, but I would like to say one thing, if I could. It's actually not a good thing, but I don't know whether or not anybody is aware and was on the Planning and Zoning Commission when Boone Moore was chairman, but I recently found out that he passed away on August 22nd at 89 years old. And I thought if anybody was on the commission at that point in time, I might want to know. So,
I was.
were you, Daryl? I never met him. But
That was my first commission chairman. Yep.
Really? Yeah,
Thanks
I
for
was
letting me
not
know.
fortunate enough to meet him, so. But I just thought I'd pass that on.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Donna. All right, so then agenda item number 5 is old business, and 5A is public hearings, and 5A1 is the main event, I think, for tonight. And I will reopen the public hearing for application numbers 52-21SP and 53-21C, Paul Zemansky, PE Arthur H. Howland and Associates for North Main Street LLC, 0 North Main Street, map 3, block 15, lot 5, proposed conservation development of 13 lots. I think that we should start by reading the bag full of written comments.
Do you want to do that?
Well, Don, I was thinking about that today. It's our custom to read them all in. I know that we have discussed in the past not reading all of the letters in. I think it would be good.
You can accept them into the record, and then have them attached to the meeting minutes, and at which point in time they become the official part of the record. So it's up to you. I know when we were having another public hearing, there were so many that John had made the decision not to read them to the public. Where did you go? I mean, you keep bouncing around on the screen. It's hard to keep track. I mean, it's entirely up to you, but it's not something that has not ever been done before.
Does the balance of the commission have any thoughts?
It's a lot of letters.
Alice, you're on mute.
And I was wondering if, I think I've read all of them. I think so. But they're all pretty unanimous. I think we just acknowledged what their points are and that they just don't, that we have X number of letters that are not for the application. I think that I think that that's okay when we have this many letters. I don't know what everybody else thinks.
I think in the interest of time, we should move on. It is a part of the record.
I agree with that. I think we've all read the letters, and anybody who's attending can say anything they want if they want to supplement the letters, but I think we've all read them. They're part of the record. There's no reason to read them again.
Alice, did you have a thought?
I was just going to say, if we had not had access to the letters before this public hearing meeting, I would suggest we would need to read them in. But since we all have had access to them, they are part of the record as far as I'm concerned. So I don't think it's necessary to read them all tonight.
Okay, well, that sounds like a majority of people of commission members who are thinking that we don't need to read them. If we don't read them, I would expect that the public comment portion of the meeting will be longer than I had originally planned. But that's fine with me. I had something prepared to say.
Well, Matt, we can still read them. I just was commenting that I didn't think it was absolutely necessary.
I have an idea. Why don't we compromise? And if there's someone who's attending this meeting who wrote a letter, who would like to read it themselves or have us read it, perhaps we do that. Just a compromise.
I think that's a great idea, Karen. If we're not going to read them ourselves, let's have the people who are joining us tonight, if they want to read their letters aloud, they are welcome. And if they want to make comments outside of the letter to reinforce their written comments, they can do that too. I think that's a good idea.
And I also think that it should be noted that state how many letters there were for and how many letters there were against.
Okay, so I will say that there were 2, 6, 7,
20.
8, 9, 10, 11. How many?
I counted 20, but I may have missed one or two.
24, 25, 26, 27, 28. 28
Oh,
letters.
20.
28 letters plus an op-ed written in the Hartford Current, which I read, but it wasn't submitted for the record. Okay, so then let me say something, and then I'll turn it over to the applicant, and then we will open it up for public comment. I want to thank everybody who took the time to submit written comments. Some of the comments were submitted by members of the community whose opinion I trust and have found them particularly valuable. The zoning regulations are a set of rules the commission uses to evaluate land use applications. In some cases, these rules are completely objective. In other cases, the rules require a certain amount of subjective analysis. In the first case, a proposed use is either permitted or it's not. And an application, in the first case, a proposed use is either permitted or it is not. And an application is therefore either approved or denied. In the latter case, the regulations provide a framework in order to navigate and manage the subjectivity. There is never an instance where the regulations allow for complete subjectivity. The use proposed by this application is permitted by special permit. A special permit requires some subjective analysis. The framework provided in the regulations can be found in regulation sections 3100, 5000, 10400, 10300, and 6700, and also in the subdivision regulations. As is our custom, the commission will carefully evaluate the proposal. If we find that the proposal does not satisfy the considerations of the regulations, then we are bound to deny the application. If we find the proposal does satisfy the considerations of the regulation, then we are similarly bound to approve. I find the regulations to be really helpful for me in my evaluation. I know the commission really carefully considers each application in light of what the regulations tell us to do. So that's my spiel. So I will open it up to the applicant, and Paul, if you want to start, or if your clients want to start, that's fine with me. But I'll give you the floor.
Yeah,
Matt,
good.
I'm sorry, Matt, can I ask a sort of procedural question first in response to the statement you just made?
Okay, Mark.
It seems as though the applicant has crafted their subdivision to comply with our subdivision regs. I thought you said if they've done that correctly, we have no options but to approve. Is that right? Or is it still within our purview to say, I don't know on what basis, yes, you crafted it to comply with the regs, and it does, but we still think it's not in the best interest of Kent, or maybe adverse to health and safety, which I don't see it being the case. But even though you've crafted your subdivision to comply, and it does with the regs, we still don't have to approve it. Is that true?
I don't think so, Mark. I think that if a use is allowed by our regulations, in this case by a special permit, then there are certain conditions that the commission has to consider. If the application satisfies those conditions, then I think we're bound to approve. That's how I look at the regulations.
Okay, thanks. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Good evening, for the record, Paul Smansky, representing the applicants. I didn't know when you wanted to do public comment, Matt, for those who may want to read their letters. So if you would like to do it now, that's fine by me, or after, whatever you prefer.
I'd like to hear where you guys are, Paul.
Yeah, no problem. Sounds good to me. Just leaving the option out there. So since the last meeting, we've been working hard with several other entities. So we have met with the Department of Transportation on site. We provided our sightline analysis to them to demonstrate that it complies for the speeds on the roadway in both directions. And we will be getting a written comments from them, which we will share with you. We will be requesting that this be continued because we feel we still need some documentation to make the record complete. We provided a formal request to the WPCA as it related to demonstrating that they have the capacity to serve this project. So we provided them with some design flow calculations and the plans for them to weigh in. We're hoping at the beginning of next week, they'll be giving us formal guidance in that respect. With respect to the volunteer fire department, we had gone back and forth with the assistant chief as it related to the specifications for the town of Kent ladder truck. So we modified our turning template analysis throughout the site to mimic the ladder truck, which is their largest apparatus that may serve the site. We provided that to them, and the assistant chief and chief are reviewing that and will be back in touch with us. We also, through Donna, had submitted the comments to the town engineer, and those are forthcoming so that then we can address any comments or concerns of Banker Engineering. We also have carefully reviewed the site plan and special permit standards and are preparing a line-by-line response of how we feel we are compliant with each of those sections, and we will supplement our original submission that demonstrated compliance with section 3100 as well as the performance standards, just as the plans have been modified, so that the commission can see that we are still in full conformance. I'm going to turn it over to the applicants. So they have done a little bit of homework for you as it relates to an additional view that was requested and go over that and some other tweaks that they've made. So without further ado, we'll turn it over to Andrew.
Hi, thanks, Paul. Thank you, everyone, again. Andrew Bacon. I'm going to, if it's possible, Donna, for me to share my screen, I will.
Yeah, you can share.
Okay, thank you. So we've all seen the presentation, and I'm going to go through quickly anything that might have been updated. And Paul, feel free to jump in if you feel you can articulate this better.
I will.
Again, thanks. The existing site, as we all know, our plans that have been slightly tweaked in terms of landscapes and plantings. We'll go into that more in the views, but we're also looking for any feedback on this as well. So none of that's set in stone. We want to work with everyone to arrive at the best solution possible for all the different parties. As we know, originally we had pushed units further away from 7, and that this plan reflects that. The purpose was to create this additional buffer by adding conservation and protected area to the in addition to the easement along 7. But this is a real quick point. We were asked about garbage collection. There's not a central collection. They're all individual and stored in garages. The aerial view that we've had since from the beginning continues to be slightly massaged, but it remains consistent. Again, just closer view. And we were asked to provide plans for the community barn showing, basically what that would be. And it's, effectively an all-purpose room, some equipment and storage, ADA bathroom and pantry that we had discussed. The concept is of course for community use. There were comments about parking. There's access to it in front, but there's not significant parking because the purpose is not for events. The purpose is for community use as an amenity. That drawing it reflects what's happening on the southern gateway at the Kent Land Trust Barn, which was the inspiration. We'd like to keep it consistent. It's actually very comparable what we're requesting permission for in terms of scale for the top main massing of the barn. But we'd like to use comparable details, materiality, color, similar roof overhang. The openings would have the same operable panels to cover any fenestration when not in use. Again, similar size. This was the view from last time, and this was to show our intent to try and keep some of the view and not block it, grasslands and meadows and the mountain beyond. This does not reflect any street trees, which we had removed in the entry area of the new road. We're happy to consider putting any of those back. Again, this is sort of, this is a dialogue that we want to engage with. This was a diagram of that view from last time, showing it's been slightly updated just to match the plantings in Paul's landscape drawing. And this is the view now looking into the cluster in the lower area. I think this is what everyone was asking to see. This again, we feel should have more screening in front of the cluster. That can be closer to the cluster or closer to the road with us. Again, it's a dialogue we want to engage in. But we didn't want to provide a rendering that was just trees because we wanted you to understand the scale of the buildings and how the cluster sits on the land. This view is taken from really just the very, very tip of the property line where the screening trees just where you can peek out. Further down, both you go downhill as well as having screening trees. It blocks a lot of the view of the site. So this is the first point at which you would really encounter that if you were looking out to the side. This is just that view, showing the rendering next to the diagram. And again, the same view from the top. The other thing so moving on from the views, another thing we were asked to look at in further detail was the HOA covenants. And Paul, please feel free to speak to the language that I'm using here. But one of the concerns is the life cycle of the project, and something that's obviously a very passionate project for us. And we want to also have relatively restrictive covenants as well. We want this to be successful, and we want the lifespan of the project to reflect that. So what we're suggesting is that the homeowners association covenants regarding appearance improvements, alterations would be subject to planning and zoning review as a condition of the application approval to verify they sufficiently ensure that we're outlining, which are, and this is, going to read through this just so it's on the record, but improvements and alterations to individual or shared property requiring HOA approval, in addition to any applicable ARB or planning and zoning approval requirements for those specific improvements or alterations. These include, for the home, and from the perspective of the homeowners association, that work would be anything for building exteriors, hardscapes, all trees, landscape plantings or hedges, shrubs taller than 4 feet. The HOA decisions must conform to a formally adopted design guidelines, which I'll go on the next page, and planning and zoning application intent. So including this and codifying what we're talking about here into that document. Those decisions also face zoning and special permit restrictions as well. The HOA would be obligated to consider the impact of public adjacent properties, other homeowners and environment, wildlife, and decisions to ensure alignment with the intent of this application. The design guidelines generally cover cladding materials, finishes, fenestration, roof style, building type, etc. The landscaping design guidelines would consider views and keep entire site in harmony with the conservation areas, the meadows and wooded areas. So they're native or complementary species. So you don't have someone doing landscaping on their own property where it's a formal hedge maze or something that's inconsistent with the look and feel of the existing site, which as we've pointed out in past, we're trying to utilize the features of the site, both the meadow and the wooded area uphill, and try and do minimal impact. So we're not tearing this apart and regrading the entire thing in a way that's different than what exists already. Normal things in HOA covenants too, no outdoor storage of recreational vehicles or trailers. We would like to restrict also in size based on the percentage of the existing buildings, and that's all of that is also subject to special permit approval. In terms of management of the appearance of the site, the HOA would manage the conservation areas, maintain shared properties, drainage areas, and specific features of individual properties. For example, the screening trees adjacent to the southern neighbor, access paths as well, those would be maintained. The individual homeowners would also, in the agreement, be required to maintain their features of their building and exterior and landscape in accordance with the design guidelines as well. And we wrote this in terms of appearance, but I also want to note, just in response to some of the comments of the letters, the homeowners association would also would also talk about noise and what people are permitted to do in trying to make sure that would not become a nuisance. We also talked to Paul, and there wouldn't be any floodlights, there would be downlights, so it's dark sky type of lighting on all exterior. The design guidelines that I'm referencing in the page ahead would articulate and codify the design intent of this presentation, this application, and the look and feel. And these are pages from presentations from previous meetings. This would be part of what we would be codifying in those. So that's the updates. Paul, do you have anything to add?
No, just basically working on the HOA guidelines that Andrew had discussed. Basically, for anyone who's in the audience who might not have been at prior meetings, we had indicated that basically any deviation from what we're proposing requires us to come back to the commission. We also have to go to the Architectural Review Board to review the final elevations and floor plans and properties of each of these when we go back. So this is a preliminary process in that there's still a second bite at the apple, so to speak. And it's to ensure consistency with what is proposed, from a massing perspective and scale perspective. And those are the kind of protections and features that you wouldn't have with a typical subdivision per se, where you'd have significantly larger lots and the ability to support significantly larger houses. And so what we're requesting is we've prepared for the record these HOA requirements, and then we're just requesting that the actual formal documents, which are extremely voluminous, be submitted to the commission as a condition of approval, so that you and Donna can confirm that everything that is represented as part of this record was incorporated into those documents.
Yes, because we understand that it's important to what you're looking at as well. And just as a broad comment, because I know we're going to go into a larger discussion here upcoming. We feel very strongly that we are trying to consider the site in a sensitive way. we came across this land. We had this idea while we were looking for land, and it's a very special land. And obviously, the public, the neighbors, the community is also very passionate about it, and we recognize it and we appreciate that, and we recognize the responsibility to do right. And that's one of the reasons we have been going down this longer road of engaging the commission and working within the new regulations to try and create something where we are conserving open space, where we are able to create a smaller scale of house as opposed to a more as of right subdivision where it is more of a suburban development. We don't think that's right for this, of course. We're really excited about it, and we know there are other people that are very excited about it. There's people that want more units on it. Obviously, most people want more open space, and we recognize that. And we can, well, Paul and me, Paul and I can address specifics, but just as a broad overall view, we appreciate everyone's patience, and especially the commission, and for going through this process, and we anticipate to be patient as well. Thank you.
Paul, I know that you had all submitted some additional engineering data. Do you want to go through some of that now, or should it stand on its own?
I think it stands on its own. It was pretty minor with respect to the modifications that were made. The general intent and purpose of everything that it is the same. That's it.
Okay. So if it's okay with the applicant, I'll move on to inviting the public to comment. So I'll do that now. And again, let's try to keep this orderly. And I'll try to, I think I can see everybody on one screen here. So, raise your hand and I'll call on you. And if I'm missing you, Donna, would you poke me? And Tony wants to say something first. Mr. Zunino.
Yes, I'm Tony Zunino, Z-U-N-I-N-O. I think you asked. We've been residents of Kent since 1979 and live about a mile away from the site. As many of you know, I've been part of the Kent Land Trust since its conception. And one of the first priorities of the Kent Land Trust was to look at the Kent character study that was done in the 70s that identified areas in Kent which needed to be protected and were of special importance to the definition of what Kent was. One of the major aspects of those characteristics was the fact that the village of Kent was a defined area, i.e., when you came in from the south, there were rural fields, and then you knew when the town began. Same on the northern end, as opposed to New Milford, which you never really know when you're in it and when you're leaving it, because it just spreads out. So we were successful in protecting the southern gateway by purchasing those fields, and I think that it's appreciated that there is, when you arrive in Kent and when you've left the country. On the northern gateway, we have not been a success. So we did pursue it, but we're not able to secure it. But the open space there that the development is being proposed is critical to defining the northern edge of the village of Kent. And I think that it is, and I've seen from many of the letters that it's not just the land trust idea of this or the professionals who did the character study, but I think the residents of Kent also appreciate that the fact that the village is separated by this open space. And while I think you've been very sensitive as to the architecture and stuff and design, I think it would be great if you could just move it over the hill, just move it further west. So I know it'd be more expensive and stuff, but that would preserve that open field that you see from the road, which is critical. It's critical to the definition of the village of Kent. And I think it's something that would be a terrible thing to lose. And I think that you could keep the same number of units, but just preserve that open space that you see, that field that you see from Route 7. That's pretty much my view of things. I'm not speaking for the Kent Land Trust. I'm certainly speaking from somebody that is connected with it and who feels strongly, as do many of the residents here, that that is a critical piece of property, and that you are not preserving the character of Kent by building on that field there. Just if you could just move everything out of sight, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Who's next? Okay, I see you listed as David.
Yes, David Ewer, Y-E-W-E-R. We are in fact the neighbors to the south. Good evening. I had start out a number of comments and a little bit colored by what I do during my days, but one question to start. I sensed some uncertainty as to the powers, or at least I'm uncertain as to the powers of the commission when you were saying whether you had the right or ability to say yes or no. I'd understood it was under special permit and that you had the right to suggest changes in the amount of open space and other fundamental changes to the project. So I don't know if I'm right or wrong on that, but if we're all not certain, maybe we should get some direction from town council as to what the regs do say.
Okay.
So secondly, again, I don't want to repeat too much of what the person who went before me said, but when you look at the project, there's a lot of buildings on a fairly small piece of land. You know, it's about 7 acres, 14 structures, not including garages. And as my wife mentioned in her letter to the board, that's the same number of structures as you have in the town of Kent, running from the Fife down to the Episcopal Church. And it's a lot of structure in a fairly small area. I mean, my own view would be that you would want to maintain open space near the road, not down in the back where no one can see it. The open space that we're conserving here is visible to no one, practically not even the people who will live on the site. So what you've done is you've conserved open space that doesn't really impact the town. Open space, in my mind, at least some portion of it should be along the road and back in a depth from the road. So I would like to suggest that either the number of houses is reduced, that would be ideal, or in some way where there's a corridor where instead of just sort of a rectangle in the back, the open space makes a turn and comes up to the road. So there's a long depth of meadow that everyone in Kent can enjoy, not just the people on the site. So people driving by, visitors to Kent, et cetera, because I think that the economic benefit, look, we're all in favor of, new families, growth, good thing with if done correctly. But I think that the economic benefit of tourism and visitors far exceeds the benefit of a few extra houses on a very sensitive and very important plot of land. So additionally, I had a question. I visited the architect's website and I didn't see I mean, didn't dig through it too much, but I didn't see discussion of developments and subdivisions. And this is going to be a pretty major undertaking, this number of houses all being done at once on spec. And so I have a few questions for them around, have they had experience building a project of this size before and complexity? Is their financing committed? Does it take into account contingencies in case there are overruns, if they have to blast or chip away to get through rock to build foundations, et cetera? Because it would really even be worse if something happened midstream and there was a problem. And then additionally, just from my point of view, being a southern neighbor, I see that the road is now turned for the pool. The road is now turned and runs along the property border. And I would request that if this is approved and goes forward in this fashion, that the line of blocking trees extends down until that road turns to the north to head towards the pool. So I'm not looking at a roadway. And also that during construction, I'm assuming the trees will go in after construction. I think that there should be a sound barrier fence and view barrier fence that goes in before construction starts. So when people are hammering and banging and digging, that at least some of the noise is directed away from the town of Kent.
So with regard to questions in this public comment period, I suggest that we make it through the public comment period and we let the applicant address those comments at one time, so we don't have too much of a back and forth between the questions from the public and the applicant. Mr. Ewer, is that is that the balance of your comments, or do you have something else?
Oh, I think we'll probably have some other things, but I think I don't want to dominate things, and I'm sure other people will say much of what I have to say, so I don't want to be the only one annoying everyone this evening. So, and I think your idea of having them trying to go through all the questions and accumulate them all, because some I'm sure they can answer immediately, and I'm sure some they'll have to do a little bit of work on. So I think your suggestion is right on.
Okay, thank you. So who's next? Mr. Good?
Yeah, hi, Matt. Hi, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to talk. As a for
the record, your first and last name?
Yeah, Tim Good. I'm a resident here in Kent, also a business owner. And I was president of the chamber for 6 years, and concerned about how Kent is branded and going forward. There's only a few things. Most of what I've had to say is in the letter, so I'm, in respect, I'm not going to go back over those things. But there's a couple of things I'd like to ask, or at least emphasize. Number one, like I said, we can't emphasize enough the Kent brand. As Mr. Zanino, stated, coming in from the south, from the north, the fact that the Yankee magazine sees it as eye candy coming through that corridor. It was very clear that Kent Land Trust had an emphasis to protect the Southern Gateway. Unfortunately, we never got the opportunity, I guess, to extend that to the Northern Gateway, but there's as much traffic coming that way and should be considered. One thing, in regard to what David just said and what you alluded to earlier, Matt, was in regards to the conservation special permit. If this is moving forward, as is kind of somewhat suggested, I'm concerned that, or should I say, there is an opportunity here I hope there is anyway, for the commission to look at this from the point of view of that they do have some latitude within the regulations in regards to it being a special permit, and as regards to the amount of percentage of conservation land over, the situation of the building land. So that's all I'm going to say on that. As far as I'm concerned about the length of the project and the possible blight that we see everywhere, not only in and around our vicinity, but across the country, across the state. And it really does concern me that that this project is going to get so far down the road and then make a U-turn, or it's going to get changed or whatever. And we've also seen in the past, from Kent's own experience, Saddle Ridge, Kent Barnes, to name but two where those particular projects have been altered during the build out. You know, either they've been altered because they've changed the emphasis or the style of the buildings, gone back to the zoning, and zoning in respect of only being able to shrug their shoulders and go, well, if you can't afford it, you can't afford it. There's nothing we can do about it. And that really is a concern. I think if we're going to, the last thing anybody in Kent wants to see is a road going and no buildings being put up. I know that goes to the one extreme to the other, but I think it's a consideration, that we need to look at that and consider to make sure that we've got enough, backup or at least something, so we're all in lockstep, so we know that that's going to be an acceptable situation. And then finally, just outside of this, going forward, Stuart Wurtzel, who was actually on a train tonight going up to Boston, he wrote me and he said, look, and he mentioned Stuart, he's already written a letter, but he did mention one thing which I thought was really, really interesting. He said for something as large and impactful on the north entry to town, it was remarkable that there was a little notice to the townspeople. I heard something that was put on the Waterbury paper, but might as well have been put in the Boston Globe. Why not local papers, the New Milford, Spectrum, Lakeville Journal, blah, blah, blah. I think the point he's making is well taken, and that, going forward with this project and well as other projects, that there is that the town, a lot of the people on this call, unless word had been put out to them, they were, I've spoken to a lot of people who weren't aware of this. So I think just, I just want to make that remark to the zoning commission that, we need to consider that on a go forward basis, so that we've kind of got some, some viewpoints from the public and the public in the future. I think that's about it. Thank you respectfully for listening to my comments.
Thanks, Tim. Ms. Wasti, you had your hand up.
Hi, thanks. Well, first of all, I think, the project is very sensitive to the space. However, and I want to like it. I do like it. I live right across the street. I'm actually even closer than the Ewers to the construction that'll be happening. And if you look at Google Maps, you will see the density in town, and then you'll see it kind of tapers out. Our property is 3 acres, other properties are 4 acres, 5 acres, and it kind of just tapers out away from town. Now, all of a sudden, we're going to be throwing this density right here at the gateway, which to me, and I know a lot of these points other people have gone over, but I just wanted to emphasize this, that, putting this density in this field is to me just really concerning, because I think it does kind of dilute where the town center is. It is not really walkable. I know it is. However, I actually run or walk every day into town, and I'm by myself or I'm with my dog. I'm like taking my life in my hands half the time, with cars coming up the hill, cars going down the hill. So the whole idea that this is in town is not really true. The other thing I'd like to say is about the open space, because you've added some open space at the front, and then there's a lot of open space in the back, but the open space is supposed to be contiguous. It's supposed to be one big open space. And like I think Mr. Zunino said, I love the project in concept. I wish it was pushed way back off of 7. In my letter, I included a picture of coming up the hill, where you really are just going to see those 4 houses coming out of our driveway on the south side of the site plan. Coming out of my driveway, I'm basically going to come right out into the side of a garage on on that property. And so I'd really like to see some sort of reconfiguration. I would prefer less density in general in that spot. I just think fewer houses would work much better there. And I would say add more open space and keep the view of that field, like, you know, as much as possible, keep it like it is, rather than just putting screening trees in front of houses. And I think that's, you know, I think Tim said it about just another huge fear of mine is, what if these houses don't sell? Or what if something happens midway? You know, it not only affects our quality of life, having to look at it, but it affects the value of our home here too. So, you know, I think we're putting a lot of faith in the developers. And like I said, conceptually, I love this idea, but I think it takes a lot of consideration to go forward. I think that's all I've got.
All right, thanks. Before you sign off, would you just say your full name, please, and spell your last name for me?
Yeah, Joanne Wasti, and it's W-A-S-T-I. Sorry about that.
Okay, great. I see Mr. Backrack. I don't see him anymore. Oh, there he is. He's no Catherine now.
Peter Britton here.
Thank you. Bill Backrack. I want to share much of a letter from Kent Affordable Housing, a 3-person committee of Kent Affordable Housing that's been tasked to respond to this initiative. 15 years ago, P&Z showed its support when it approved a lot size as small as 1 acre for building an affordable home. Regulations were also expanded to allow a 3rd home on a common driveway if that driveway were to be affordable. Will the Commission in 2021 speak up for affordable housing as it moves to consider a subdivision of 13 high-end homes? And if it is reluctant to impose any such requirements upon North Main Street, Kent, it should set expectations for any future subdivision applicant. Developers of new homes in Kent should understand that affordable housing ownership in Kent is a P&Z core value and one part of their mandate as they seek P&Z approvals. Many Connecticut towns have adopted ordinances requiring affordability in 10% or 20% of new housing in subdivisions. Some towns provide a cash option for developers who want the required affordable homes to be built on a separate site, but that's not our preference. Might the Commission agree at its meeting tonight to bring to one or more of its fall meetings an experienced consultant to explore some of these options for Kent? Sincerely, Bill Backrack, Hal Cam, Greg Sheridan. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Bill. Somebody who's just listed as first name Peter, you were beginning to speak as Bill started.
Thank you, Matt. So I'm Peter Britton. I'm the Britton estate there, right on Route 7 as you're going up that hill to the right there. I'm sure you all know the house, and I sort of apologize because we haven't been really close to this and involved probably to the level that we should be. So let me just do that as a preference. But I think a lot of great comments have been made. Look, our family has been in this town for a couple of 100 years now, right? And so we have a lot of history. We have a lot of, feelings about what is right and what is wrong that goes on in Kent. This is one of the more sort of newer, if you will, development projects that have come in front of the town, I think, at least for me. And so I think the key thing for us as the Britton family, and my cousin Tom is on the phone as well to ask him to offer any sort of insights as well, is to make sure if you're going to do this project in this locale, I think it's really important that the aesthetics of coming into town from the north down into that spot and down into the hill, down the hill from there is really critical, right? The thing to me, I don't want to kill development. I think it's important that we offer up, development for the town, and it can be great for the commerce that goes on with the restaurants and all. Although I do have issues there because I think the amount of commerce that goes on in that little town of Kent in the course of the summer with all the motorcycles and all the activities, like over the top currently, right? So I'm not sure that the town needs a whole lot more commerce, to be honest. But I think the thing for me as one of the many family members of our property there is that I just don't want to have the approach of coming from the north down into town sort of destroyed. And so one of the guys said it earlier, maybe you move it down. Can you move it, a quarter of a mile or whatever it might be farther down routes or up Route 7, I should say, would be an interesting concept. Or if we're going to keep it in the location that it is, and it's going to get approved to do that, then I really feel we need to get it back to me, it seems very crowded, just like a lot of people have said. It seems very crowded in terms of the amount of housing that's going to go in to that sort of very relatively small area. So I think from the perspective of the Britton family, that's a true concern on our part, that the aesthetics of the town continue to get maintained. We've been dealing with this for a long time in terms of trying to maintain the town and make it continue to be, as pretty as it's always been. So I just want to throw that out there is one of the truly probably longest standing family in that town, or damn close, to say that's the aesthetic thing of this whole issue is really a major issue for us. And so I want to make sure the town and all of you involved in the project, keep that very much in tune. And I don't really know the buildings, how they're going to look, how many windows, what, a lot of that detailed design of the actual houses. But in looking at those renderings, it seemed like it was a bit of and pardon the expression, but a very condensed living habitat, if you will, right there in the relatively small area. So just like the neighbors have said, and I'm one of the neighbors, right? So, but thanks. I just want to say thank you for including us and letting us, have our moments to speak, and appreciate all the work you guys do on this.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Anybody else want to jump in next? There's a couple of people who are listening and looking who haven't spoken. Ms. Brown?
Hello. I agree with the previous
Name and spelling, please.
Sorry. I'm Joy Brown, BROWN. And I agree with the previous speakers about the critical importance of the aesthetics of this field entering from the north. But what I wanted to ask was, were the 28 letters against this proposal, or were they divided? Or I wasn't clear on that initially.
The majority of the letters spoke in favor of keeping that parcel open.
Okay, thank you.
There were a few that spoke about other concerns, not so much. Yeah, there are a few other concerns, but the majority was the sort of nay vote.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And anybody else?
I would love to just introduce one thought. Is it out of the question that we could flip the design, the layout, so that the bulk of the houses are down lower and you're not having the entrance of the gateway, this sort of wall of houses that's the first thing you come to? Couldn't they have the same number of, I think it's too many for the site. It's terribly crowded. but let's say we're stuck with that. Could we put the houses lower down on the western border and have the open space available to the northern gateway that all the people coming into can? I'm very worried about traffic, but everybody else knows that too.
Could you please identify yourself?
So I'm sorry, I'm Maggie Stearns. I live at the condominiums across the road.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Stearns. Yes, Ms. Ewer.
Hey, so sorry, two people at the same commuter, but it's Dorothy, you were David's wife. And I had a point to make, which is I found in the regulations, and it's been pointed out to me by other people, that there is a caveat that says that the commission, unless it modifies, it has to be 40% conservation. But that ability to modify, if I read it correctly, is up to the P&Z. So that would mean that if you all agreed that this is a great plan, but that it should perhaps be 60% open space, that you have that ability to make that a caveat or a restriction. So I just wanted to point that out. The second thing is I do have a bunch of questions, and I wonder if I should just ask them super quickly so that they can be answered in aggregate. And one is, if this is granted a permit, is that permit transferable? How much will the houses sell for? You've talked a little bit about the noise. Let's see. Oh, the renderings from Route 7 are better, but I'd still like to see what it looks like as you're driving up, as in going north. And I think the most important question that never seems to get answered is how long will this take? And I understand that there's no quick answer, but there must be a parameter. There must be some sort of framework as to the expectation of what is involved. So those are my main questions. The other questions are in the letter and can be addressed at another time, but I think those are important to the conversation and should be talked about tonight. So thank you from the viewers. I think that's it.
Can I add one thing in while we're there? On the scheduling, I mean, I'm actually familiar with a fair amount with construction, and many of the projects that I work on and look at, you know, they're 2 year, 3 or whatever they are, and they're building big buildings, they're doing developments, and there's a pretty set schedule because the developer needs to know how long it's going to take, how much the financing costs are going to be. All that is integral to the budget to make sure that they're not going to run out of money and the thing's going to get built. So I would like to think that that has in fact been at least addressed, and they know what that schedule is and they could share it with us. And to the point from our friend who just spoke, you know, if you can, you know, obviously we'd like to keep the area near Route 7 open for the benefit of all the visitors and residents of Kent, as opposed to hiding it in the back where no one can see it. And I think that should be something to contemplate for future conservation developments, if not for this one, that there should be some rule about, well, you can't just hide it away where it doesn't benefit anybody, which is, I think, basically the case here. You know, at the very least, maybe the barn moves back and is north of the pool. So at least that's one building out of the front, moved to the back. And so it's less loading, and it's a big building, 60 feet or 65 feet by 30 feet. So maybe that moves to the back, and it also ameliorates some of the noise issues because it's now further away from town and has a little bit of berm and hill between it and the town and other people, other residents. So especially the people across the street, like the Casey's up on Cobble Lane and the Wasties, et cetera. Thank you.
And just David, identify yourself one more time for the record.
No, it's David Ewer, Y-E-W-E-R.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so there have been a lot of great, oh, I'm sorry. Wendy Murphy has her hand up. Wendy, if you're speaking, you're on mute.
Sorry, how's that?
Great.
Okay, all right. I went on a great length in something I wrote today about all the points that have been made about the open space and how much time we put in and worrying about the gateways for 20 years and what a loss that would be. But let me ask a practical question, since that other part was covered so well. I want to raise briefly a technical question. Kent is not one of the 80 towns in Connecticut that are regulated under DEEP's Aquifer Protection Area Program, which was enacted in 2004. Aquifers are the principal storage places for water that falls to earth as rain or snow, is absorbed and evaporates in the constant hydrological cycle. Aquifers were hard to find and harder to measure quantitatively in historic times. Man-made reservoirs and well fields yielding water via pumping stations were thought to be how people managed a community's need for clean water into eternity. And it was long assumed that time alone would keep water in a constant state of self-cleaning. Kent has a despoiled aquifer at the junction of Route 341 and South Kent Road. It is unfit for drinking because the place has been used for decades to store state road salt. So my question is, do we know whether as yet unexplored aquifer lies directly below this proposed subdivision? Aquifers tend to lie near riverbeds. Kent's principal aquifer lies, I should say, discovered aquifer lies along Cobble Road, not far from the proposed development. Shouldn't we ask DEEP to clear this property for residential development and intensive development at that before we let the bulldozers and blasting engineers in to tear it up? Does anybody know what's going on underneath that land?
So Wendy, we'll wait and let the applicant respond to all the questions at once. So we'll note that question and try to get an answer from the applicant.
Good, thank you.
And Jos Spelbos, and you're on mute. Still?
Okay.
There we go.
Sorry. The Kent Conservation Commission asked me to make a short statement. The Conservation Commission finds that the proposed subdivision will negatively impact the northern gateway to the village, which is designated as an important town character area in the town's plan of conservation and development. The defining feature of this town character area are the view of the open fields, including the sloping meadow at the north end with the old barn, and the view of the mountains behind it, as well as how it clearly defines the edge of the village. The subdivision and open space layout in the proposal doesn't protect this view and blurs that edge. This proposal cannot be called a conservation development, in our view. Then one more thing, the commission also asked the Planning and Zoning Commission to publicly support the formation of a town land acquisition fund that can be used in the future to acquire at-risk properties like this one that Kent residents find important enough to protect. And then I want to add one personal note that was mentioned before also by Tim Good, to get more input from town residents on the front end instead of late in the game, as is happening here. Subdivision proposals need to be publicized better, such as linking it in the town selectmen's newsletter, or putting a big sign up at the subdivision site that shows the proposed layout and what meetings are going to be held. So I'd like to add that. Thank you.
Jos, would you say your name out loud, please?
Sorry, the name is Jos Spelbos.
Matt, just one last thing. Can I just say one last quick thing, please? Is Tim good?
Okay, Tim.
Okay. As the president of the I meant to mention this before, so I apologize. As the president of the chamber for 6 years, one thing I learned, in all the time we were, all of those businesses are always trying to bring in new business into Kent. And I think there's a little bit of short-sightedness in regards to the fact that, yes, it's going to bring new families into town. It's going to help with the Housatonic school region. We all understand the impact and what it's going to, and the advantages. What we've also got to be clear about is diminishing the quintessential look of the town and the Kent branding is going to, over time, erode the amount of people that come into town, and therefore have, you know, it's going to impact business. Maybe not next year, maybe not the year after, but clearly what I found through my tenure of the president of the chamber was, you know, we emphasized a lot and we relied heavily on tourism, and that should be taken into consideration as well. So anyway, that was all. Thank you.
Okay, so we are recycling a lot of comments. I mean, there have been some new comments, but I think at this point I would like to turn it over to the applicant to make whatever comments or additional presentation that you want. So you all have the floor, and when you guys are all done, then I think we'll have the commission sort of deliberate a bit.
Sounds good. Thanks, Matt. For the record, again, Paul Szymanski representing the applicant. Just going over some of the concerns that were brought up tonight. I'll address some of the concerns that were brought up in letters that were not brought up tonight. There was some commentary with respect to the size of the property. Someone had mentioned it's seven acres in size. The property is actually just a hair under 13 acres in size. We had originally had the homes in the southern portion of the property closer to the roadway based on commentary that was received as part of the public hearing process. We had moved those homes back and added a strip of permanent open space along the roadway based on commentary that was received. Due to the moving of that, the home for lot 13 is now 125 feet away from the roadway. Lot 12 is now 80 feet away, the home, and the home on lot 11 is 125 feet. If you look at the homes just directly to the south, the Ewer residence is about 45 feet off the road, and the Wasti residence is 25 feet off the road. So we've provided a significantly larger buffer to the roadway than what exists south of this property. If you look at the Kent Hills condominiums, the face of those are also closer than what we are proposing as well. I know there was some discussion as it relates to, in this area, there's a tapering of density. But as I noted in the Kent Hills condominiums, which is 80 North Main Street, I believe, there's over 80 units. When you travel north of here, going towards the Kent Falls on the left-hand side before the Sloan Museum, we have the Brookwoods condominiums. There's over 30 units in there, and those are in a much more defined sort of area. We have considered the vegetation aspect of the project. It was noted that we would not do the vegetation until after construction. Actually, one of the things that we would request is that if the commission was to consider approval, that the screening along the south side be installed prior to the commencement of any construction on site. And that's to provide screening to the property directly to the south. We're also willing to put in a requirement that we monitor and replace any of the vegetation that we're proposing for a period of 3 years. That allows us to go through 3 growing seasons. So if there was damage to things such as deer, or we had an event where for some reason there was a drought and they weren't properly watered, we would be required at our expense to replace them. By allowing a period of 3 growing seasons, that would allow the root systems on those to get established and no longer need our care, so we can ensure the long-term integrity of the vegetation that we're proposing. There was some commentary as it related to the open space requirement within the regulation itself. The actual section of the regulation wasn't read. Subsection C states, unless modified, it basically says that a minimum of 40% is required unless modified by the commission. So that was the intent, was that it could be decreased if there was a need on certain certain properties. There was a discussion about just putting the development in the rear of the property. That is impossible. One of the performance standards for your open space criteria, one of the primary conservation areas is the preservation of slopes steeper than 25%, which is a large amount of our open space in this case. So to be able to get from the upper portion of the property down to the lower portion of the property, you would be traversing over slopes that are, let me just see here one second, that are on the order of 25%. And we're talking over a distance of, you know, 100 feet. So over 100 foot, you have 25 feet of elevation change to get the rear of the property. That would require a inordinate amount of land disturbance and grading to be able to get down into there and meet the grading requirements of the zoning regulations. Then once you got down there, you would then be constructing on prime farmland soils, which is one of the secondary conservation areas within the performance standards. It should also be noted that that area is only about 100 to 110 foot deep, and it gets steeply sloped in the northern end of the property. You compare that to the area along the roadway, which has a depth of about 400 feet. So the depth is approximately 4 times deeper along the roadway in comparison to the rear. So it's not even remotely close to being possible from a feasibility perspective. I know there were some concerns that this would turn into blight during construction. If we assume worst case scenarios, the documents are the documents. It has to be built to the standards that are proposed from an aesthetics perspective, from a massing perspective, from a landscaping standard. So for some reason, all of these applicants die and it gets sold and bought by someone else, they're still bound to the same standards as it relates to the HOA documents, the special permit standards, and the submissions that were made to this commission. Any modifications to those have to be brought back to the commission for approval. And I want to be clear about that. There was some notations as related to the gallery and other projects. Any modifications that are made to a property has to come back to the commission, and in the village center, my understanding is it has to come to the architectural review board as well. So there is a review process that's done whenever there's any deviations from the plans that are considered for approval. There was a question about noise. Andrew had discussed previously within the HOA documents and the rules and regulations. There's standards with respect to noise to ensure that it's not only a nuisance to the neighbors, but a nuisance to the people who are going to live here. I fully and completely understand the concerns of the neighbors of there being noise, but even closer to that would be the owners of these lots themselves. So it's in the best interest of Andrew and his team to ensure that the noise not only does not become a nuisance for you, but also does not become a nuisance for the other owners within the subject property itself. There was a comment about the barn and its location. And one of the things that Andrew tried to carefully do was mimic the barn at the southern end of the town. So you sort of have these 2 bookends of barns throughout the town. I know there's a discussion by Ms. Murphy with respect to the Aquifer Protection. The state of Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection has put out basically aquifer protection maps. There are currently 123 existing aquifer protection areas in 80 towns. So those are areas that the state has found necessary and deemed worthy of aquifer protection. As I believe she alluded to, there is not one in Kent. Reading some of the correspondence, there was also a concern that the number of lots may be increased over time. That would basically be an impossibility in the sense that we are proposing a little bit over 40% open space. So that would have to go back to the commission and they would have to deviate from the open space that we are proposing. However, not only would the hurdle of the local regulatory approval process have to be overcome, but the even bigger hurdle would be with respect to the association itself. When the HOA is created and the open space is created, that's in perpetuity. So there can't be any modifications to what is considered open space. And we have purposely sized these lots in a manner that none of them could be further subdivided. So not only do you have the protection at the local commission level, you have the protection as well through the HOA documents themselves. Andrew had discussed the fact that the lighting on the site will be dark sky friendly. So everything points down. There's no objectionable glare off the property lines or anything of the sort. There was a little bit of discussion within the letters of suburban sprawl. We've purposely proposed this process, which has become a very lengthy process in comparison to a typical as of right subdivision, because of the fact that you can preserve a larger amount of open space. You can decrease the overall infrastructure, which decreases the amount of impervious surfaces, which then decreases the amount of clearing and decreases the amount of stormwater runoff. So this was done by design. If we were to propose a typical subdivision, this would have been a much simpler process and quicker process. It would have led to substantially greater disturbance on the property. It would have led to substantially more clearing on the property. And it certainly would have led to much more cuts and fills and significantly less discretion from a massing perspective, because the standard criteria for lots within this zone has larger lot sizes, which allows significantly larger houses. In the letters, there were some discussions about environmental impact statements. We are outside of any wetlands or water courses or upland review area. So from an environmental perspective, we have maintained all appropriate separations. And Andrew also touched base on the community building, that it's the reason there's only 2 parking spaces, I believe it is it's for the use of the residents. We had discussed at the last public hearing that there will be common things such as utensils like a paella plan or things of that nature. So the idea is that we're providing a much smaller footprint and smaller home and providing some of the amenities that a larger home might have within it, which get minimal usage, so that everyone would have the opportunity to use that. I believe that is all that I have at this point, but I'll be happy to answer any questions that the commission may have.
So Wendy had her hand up. We'll take Wendy's comment, and then I'd like to hear from. Well, before we do that, I'm sorry, Andrew. Is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Paul. Paul's obviously very good at articulating the technical aspects of what all of these questions provide. There were some other questions about, I actually like Paul to weigh in on questions about length of time of construction. Obviously, they're hard to say specifically, and we're not going to provide an answer that's going to be satisfactory to everyone and say exactly when it is. It depends on when we start. It depends on what's going on and how we're phasing them in, of course. It's in everyone's interest to expedite everything. We don't want to drag it on, both for the town as well as for the people coming in and dealing with a longer process. We're designing the houses in a way to minimize the amount of infrastructure that's required, as Paul said. So they're relatively straightforward in terms of construction. There's been, there were also comments about experience. If the commission requires us to bring in our backgrounds and our CVs, as part of this process, we're happy to do that. But on a broad stroke, our team, which is more than just myself here, we've had experience in significant architecture and development projects across all scales, including single-family residential all the way to multi-million square feet commercial projects. But in terms of financing and length of projects, Paul could also speak to that in terms of contingency upon approval, et cetera.
So from a time of construction perspective, for the roadway itself, it's a relatively simple roadway that basically works with the existing grade to the greatest extent possible. And the stormwater infrastructure is very simple as well. So the primary infrastructure related to the sewer, water, and drainage and the underground utilities, that can be done in a period of 3 to 4 months easily. And then the base course of asphalt would be placed on. Typically, we allow that to settle for a year, so that if there's any issues with respect to differential settling, that's taken care of as the second course of asphalt. But that comes together very quickly. I did my house 5 years ago, the next town over. That the house was, I don't know, about 40% larger than these. Granted, I had a little bit of motivation. My wife was pregnant at the time. But we were able to handle that from breaking ground to moving in the 9-month time period. So these houses could be done even more rapidly. We discussed at the last public hearing as well, that we would be looking to do these in clusters because there's efficiencies with respect to having a framer on site to do multiple homes at once, just like there is with a plumber, electrician, or any of the other trades. So it's advantageous to do these in a manner where multiple homes are getting done at once, so that there's efficiencies. And the way to successfully complete a project is to do it in a time efficiency perspective, which is what will be done here.
Okay, thank you. So for the record, that was Andrew Bacon and then back to Paul Zemansky. And we'll take a comment. No, that's fine. We'll take a comment from Wendy Murphy and we'll move to the commission.
Okay, very quickly, the answer that 80 towns have are part of the acquisition, the Aquifer Protection still leaves a large number of towns that are not. And I think we really need to know the answer to that. I do not want to learn that we're putting multiple houses on top of a portion of our very precious aquifer. And I think it's something we need to know. I think that's the wave of the future. We can't afford to spoil aquifers anymore. So the whole purpose of that original protection agency was to look after towns, cities of high density. They just chose not to worry about small towns, but we need to worry about ourselves these days. So that's my thought. Okay,
thanks, Wendy. So I see that Ms. Wasti and the viewers have their hands up. Let's hear it, but let's please not reiterate what we've said already. I'd really like a chance for the commission to discuss.
Who should start?
I'll start. It's going to be quick. So I guess what's the contingency plan? You're building these before selling them. What if you can't sell them?
Okay, is that it? That's the question?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And then Ms. Ewer?
Yeah, first I just want to clarify what David said, which is that the 7 acres is what the houses will be clustered on. We understand that the entire acreage is a little bit over 12 acres, but I think the most important point out of this whole thing is we're all looking for a win-win. And to me, the best way to do that is to work on this 40% open space. The language does not qualify whether it's a decrease in open space or an increase, which I think is brilliant of the committee because it gives you that opportunity to increase the open space if that's what you decide is best for the town. So while the intent from the builder's point of view might be to decrease it, it very well may be that the best thing to do is to increase it and to get rid of those southern houses and to create an open meadow to preserve that gateway, and then everyone wins. The subdivision happens, the town preserves open space, etc. So that's my final comment, but I think that is the most important part to me, or takeaway from this meeting, is that there is wiggle room, which can benefit everyone. So that is it.
Okay, great, thanks. So it appears, I think the applicant said that and obviously the commission would like some additional information from the applicant, so the public hearing will likely remain open at the pleasure of the commission. We'll decide that in, I think, in a few minutes, but are there any questions from the commission members for the applicant, something they'd like to see, something they'd like to address?
I have a question, I guess. I would like to press Paul a bit on, there were several comments that members of the public would be happy or satisfied, I'm not sure what the right word is, if the plan were flipped and the houses were put in the back and the open space was in the front. I know he said that's impossible, but that sounded a little glib to me. I mean, I'm looking at slide L1 of their plan, and as was just noted, it's 7 acres of houses and 12 acres of total property. That means if those 7 acres of houses were moved to the back, there would still be the same 5 acres of open space in the front. I didn't really understand his topographical issue about a 25% grade. But if the houses were moved to the back, that grade wouldn't be eliminated, which I thought was his point, that you're supposed to preserve grades like that. It wouldn't be eliminated. It would just be sort of a berm, which would further, frankly, shield the houses from view from Route 7. So I would like him to be a little more fulsome in his explanation.
So I think in this case, Paul, you could answer that directly, yes?
Yeah. So what I'll do, Mark, is I'll put together a little study because it's hard to discuss just verbally. So there's a 25% slope over 100 foot. So there's 25 feet of grade difference. So to be able to effectuate a road down into that area, basically we would have to have 15 foot of cut at the top or the bottom, or a combination of both. It would have to be at the top because we can't go below the existing grade down below. So there'd be a 15-foot excavation at the top to be able to get down into the site. And there's significantly smaller area that's developable. So what I'll do is I'll incorporate the setbacks down there, and I'll do a conceptual layout so you could see how many lots could be fit down there based on the topography and the constraints that we have from a road grade perspective. That's not a problem at all. So you can see what I'm talking about, and I'm not just representing it verbally. I'm going to take the time to review it and see how many we can fit down there.
Great, thanks.
My pleasure.
So as an overview, Paul, perhaps you can verify this to me. I'm understanding that
Wes, you dropped yourself onto mute.
Okay, so is this going to be completely built out before it's sold? Is there going to have to be a zoning compliance prior to the sale of any of these lots?
No, there would be a series of lots. We'd be building the road in its entirety, ensuring that the infrastructure is in, the public infrastructure, the street trees, the screening trees, which we said we'd do prior to the commencement of construction. But we would be looking for certificate of zoning compliance on each lot on an individual basis, just like other subdivisions.
But you do intend to build each and every unit.
That's correct.
Annie, you had you were just getting ready to make a comment before?
I did. I had a question about the road. And I think in the minutes it said that the town was taking care of the road and the association was taking care of the drain basins. Is that normal?
No, typically in a public roadway, the town would mow the edges of the roadway. In this case, we're doing that. The town would be responsible for cleaning the sediment out of the catch basin stumps. In this case, we're doing that. And typically the stormwater infiltration basins would be maintained by the municipality. In this case, we're doing that.
And why are you doing that?
Because the developers don't feel that the expenses associated with that portion should fall on the municipality. So I served on the town council for 6 years in another municipality. And one of the things, this was a recommendation I made to the applicant. One of the things that we saw from a public works maintenance perspective, one of the more difficult things to do is the mowing of the shoulders and the management of the stormwater infrastructure. And it's something that the towns never seem to have enough time to keep up with. As you can see, the state of Connecticut themselves has a difficult time keeping up with the road mowing of the shoulders themselves. So it was something that I had requested that the applicants consider, and it's something that they agreed to.
So why don't you just take care of the road too? Why don't you make it a private road? I mean, to me, it doesn't seem like a good idea for the town to take care of the road and the association take care of the basins. What if you have to dig something up to get into the basin? Then whose responsibility is that? Or that doesn't happen? I don't know. I don't know a lot.
Yeah,
about
no,
roads.
I didn't explain well about a catch basin. So a typical catch basin is in essence a concrete vault. And on the top of that catch basin is what's called a frame and a grate. So the frame is made of concrete, and that is an integral part of the roadway and would not be touched. There's a grate, iron grate on top of it that has openings, and that allows the stormwater to drain into it over time, as well as sediments, leaves, etc. So from a maintenance perspective, what happens is that portion of the grate is removed by hand. That is then placed to the side. And then the basins, on the bottom of the basins, they have in essence a wheelbarrow at the bottom of the basin that catches sediment and debris. And so the developer would then vac out that debris on an annual basis, so that instead of it going down the roadways and eventually into wetlands and water courses, that sediment and leaves and any other debris is being removed and disposed of in an environmentally acceptable manner. So that's work that's done by hand. There's no digging up of any sort as it relates to the maintenance.
So even if there was a repair or something, they wouldn't have to dig up the road. Those things don't get repaired.
Yeah, I mean, this would be inspected by the Public Works Department during construction to ensure that all the joints for the drainage pipe are properly installed, that the bedding for the drainage pipe is proper, so that there's no rocks or boulders within the backfill for the pipe that would pierce the pipe. The grouting, which is the covering around the pipe where it meets the catch basin, that's cemented and overseen and signed off by Public Works. So there's a whole check process during the construction process to ensure that everything's adequately installed, so that there's no failures down the road.
And then I just have one more question about this community house, because I'm really stuck on this. What is it going to be used for?
Andrew, I'm just make the water flow downhill.
Yeah, no, Paul's touched on it briefly. So one of the motivations to enable us to create smaller houses that have an appeal in the market is to centralize some of the amenities and overflow spaces. In the plan that we showed earlier, there's suggestions of study carrel type furniture, pantry stuff for large kitchen activities, larger table for larger gatherings. This way you don't have to have a giant dining room every time. Obviously, like Thanksgiving's an issue if everyone wants to use it at the same time, but on a typical week-to-week basis, it's a mechanism by which we can decrease the scale of the individual houses and create a common space. So there might be people that are on Zoom calls there during the day because there might, as opposed to having to have an extra room in your house to do that. There's obviously the appeal for social activities amongst small groups of members. That's the purpose of the community barn. There's also areas for maintenance equipment for the homeowners association, et cetera. But that's the primary use. Little co-working type for the people that live there.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Anything else from other members of the commission?
Matt, I think this has been really a terrific meeting, and I think we've gathered some really good feedback from the community. One of the things I feel as a commission member is that we have to be very careful here. If I've heard it once, I've heard it 100 times about how sensitive of a piece this is. And I agree with one of the neighbors that, we want to do the right thing so everyone wins. But in my opinion, there is still too many homes. There is still too much going on this 12 little acres. You have a pool, you have a barn, you have all these houses close to 7. I think my feeling to the rest of you on the commission is to be very, very careful here, because once we approve this, we cannot turn back. And it definitely is going to affect the rural character of Kent. It absolutely is. It's part of our face. And if we damage it, we will be looking at that. So I think there needs to be more of a balance with the approach to the property. I've asked at least twice or maybe 3 times, could there be less homes built? Nobody answers me. Could the barn go away so that the view is opened up? No answer. I also wonder why the town is involved in the road at all. Most of the associations that I'm familiar with as a real estate broker, the association takes care of all of it. So I think they tried to find a little compromise there, but I don't think it's the town's responsibility. And also, I really liked Wendy Murphy's comments about what do we know about underneath that piece of property? Not much. And I wonder, and I know Paul is a good engineer, I wonder how much they know. Is there ledge there? What's the water situation? These are key components that we have to be certain of before we grant any permits. And again, I'm going back to my first meeting of statements. If they're going to develop it, I think there should be less homes. I think it's too tight. I think it's too dense. I don't think it matches the character of our town.
So, Karen, you seem to agree with the viewer's interpretation of the regulation and our ability to request more than
Well,
40% open space.
I'm not necessarily saying that per se. I think we do have to take into consideration the character, to try to preserve the character of our town. I don't recall who said it. I think Tony Zanino did. And he really has me thinking, because it's such a sensitive piece. And once it's built on and once it's developed, you know, my great grandkids will never know that that was a beautiful open field. And I'm not saying that this shouldn't be permitted, but I think it needs to be less. That's just my own personal feeling. And I worry that the commission is just going to agree to it. And I think we all need to be careful of what we're agreeing to. And I think there's still a lot that's not. They did a good job. I have a little checklist here, and most of the questions from the developers was answered, or by people at the meeting. And just as a PS, I think Mr. Spelbo's comments about giving better public notice is really important. I liked his idea. Put a sign up, show a rendering that shows the houses, because a lot of people are just waking up to this, and it's in our hands. We're the ones that are going to make this decision. And I think there's going to be, you know, some folks that say, well, I didn't know about it. I know it's everyone's responsibility to find out, but we have to be better as a commission, you know, to get this out to the public. And I still think that the applicant needs to reduce the number of houses or change something. And also, you have a note here in the chat. Someone's asked about the traffic from the development, which I think Paul answered, but you might want to address that.
All right, thanks, Karen. Daryl, do you have anything to say, or David, do you want to jump in?
Sure. I'll just say that, you know, this is a circumstance to point out, you know, it's illustrative of a beautiful piece of land that's sort of taken for granted. And then when it's purchased or developed, it's too late. So I do think the town needs to be proactive. But with that being said, this is in the VR2 zone. This land by design was meant to have a higher density of development. So people talk about the village having a boundary, but per the zoning map, the district map, this was always envisioned to be the expansion point for the town. So given that it's not going to remain, obviously, a beautiful open field, which plenty of opportunity for people to buy privately when it's on the market and keep it as an open field on their dime, I think that it should be used for the purpose that it was intended for, which is an expansion of the town done in a sensitive manner. But it shouldn't be a surprise that, given the district map, that something like this was going to happen once that piece of property went into the marketplace. People are going to develop it based on, you know, certain potential aspects that the zoning regulations give to it. So I do think it's fortunate that the course has gone to a conservation development rather than a traditional one. So I guess my point is, if you don't want certain things to happen, there are ways to prevent it. But once a private transaction takes place, it's not the public's right to have an open field up there. So I think that some of the powers that the public wants to bestow on the commission in terms of preserving what was there, it's too late. That land's been purchased, and the people that own it have a certain set of parameters that if they develop it within, it's tough to say that they're doing something wrong.
Thanks, Daryl. Anybody else on the commission want to say something before I do?
Yeah, I just wanted to dovetail off what Daryl was saying. I think this is the northernmost piece of the village center. Just looking at the zoning map. And I mean, we all spend a lot of time carefully thinking about density in each of the zoning areas and things like setbacks and the size. You know, with all that in mind, it is very difficult to say that maybe the thought should have been when this was zoned, if we didn't want the center to potentially extend that far, it should have been zoned differently when the map was created. But it does seem like this is the intent of this piece of property, even if maybe now people wish it was not. But we do have rules about how many lots can be on a particular piece of land based on its acreage. So that's all I would point out here.
All right, thanks, David.
Matt,
Go ahead, Alice.
I don't want to repeat everything. We've gotten a lot of very, very good information tonight. And a lot of it is looking back doesn't serve us much purpose in a way. And yet we learn from it. And I'm particularly struck by tonight's discussion about this word called blight and the attempts over the years to develop in some way, somehow, housing for people. So I just want to say, I think we've got a lot to ponder, and I don't think we should rush this. And that is my primary input at this juncture.
Thanks, Alice. Mark, you wanted to say you had something to...
Yeah, I just one quick comment. I mean, there were several comments about, how long is this going to take to build? And I think the applicant's or Paul's answer was, gee, it's in our interest to do this as quickly as possible. I don't think that that's good enough. I was very outspoken about what I viewed as the disaster of Billy Morrison's gallery and the eyesore in the middle of town that was for years. And I would like us to explore, I believe we are able to put a time limit on the permit. Now, I don't know what that really means in real world. I mean, if time runs out, what are we going to say? Well, tear it down. I don't know practically how you put a time limit in, but I would like to explore it. I think it's something we should talk about.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mark. I will say a couple of things and then talk about what I think we need from the applicant going forward. I agree with David that this is this is in the Village Residential 2 district. It has been VR2 since I've been on the commission. It's not a really long time, but it'll be 12 years in a couple of months. I think that the town in the last Plan of Conservation and Development rewrite strongly suggested and urged the development of a land acquisition fund, so that the commission, as far as I'm concerned, is squarely behind that idea. I think that the Northern Gateway, that the Kent Land Trust and the Plan of Conservation and Development and most of our thinking in town, as evidenced by the comments made tonight, is to keep Kent rural and to maintain open space. I agree with Daryl that we have to do that. We have to maintain the open space within our regulations. Then I'm going to make 2 suggestions for the commission. And Don, I think I need your help with this. Is number 1, I think that we have to be clear, and I'd like some input from Attorney Ziska, as Mr. and Mrs. Ewer suggested. I want to be really clear on what our obligations are as a commission to the regulations. I believe pretty strongly in what I said at the beginning of the meeting. I know there was some question, but Don, I'd like you to ask Attorney Ziska for some comments on that.
Okay. Matt, does that mean a definition of what is an acceptance versus a denial?
What it means is that,
I mean, we can just put that to Ziska, but that's basically, we now get a resolution of both when we get ready to vote.
We do. My question is a little bit different than that. My question is, can we as a commission act completely in a subjective manner? Can we place our subjective opinion regarding an application in front of what the regulations allow and disallow? I would also like, Donna, if you would ask our planner, Glenn Chalder, to take a look at the regulation 3110B and tell us whether he agrees with the Ewers interpretation that that can go either way, that we can ask for more or less than 40%. I'll keep. That's. I know how I looked at it, and I know how I looked at it when we crafted this regulation 8 months ago. Okay, so I think that we need from the applicant some kind of a timeline and a phasing plan, at least, if in fact, as Mark said, and as Paul somewhat confirmed, that he was going to be looking for somewhat of a staged certificate of zoning compliance. So I think the commission wants to know, are we going to be issuing a partial compliance at the completion of the road and drainage structure? Are we going to be, I just want to know what the phasing plan is and the logistics. And then I think the commission should really consider requesting a bond from the applicant in the event that they run into difficulty and can't finish. I think we want some mechanism to at least finish out what they've started, or somebody to finish out what they've started, to get to a point where it's not, as we say, a blight. I think that we're allowed to do that, but Donna, if you wouldn't mind asking, I believe we can. I believe that's in our regulations that we can ask for a bond. And if Paul, when you come back to us next time, would you just confirm that the road and the drainage associated with the road, the entire structure, the entire system will be deeded to the town, and that the applicant is simply taking over the day-to-day maintenance of that? And then last couple of things. I know you've been talking to the volunteer fire department, and I know that you've adjusted the roadways, but I'd like to get some sort of affirmation from them that they're okay with the road as designed. I know you've been talking to Rick at the highway department, and I'd like just some affirmative affirmation from him that he's okay with the road. I believe that we've got affirmation from the sewer commission. And I believe that we still need the comments from the town engineer. So we were going to send these drawings to Anchor, and they were going to come back and give us some comments. So I'd like to have all of that stuff well in advance of our next meeting.
I have the, sorry, Paul, go ahead.
And DOT getting something in writing. I don't know if you mentioned that.
I didn't, but I will add that to my list. Thanks, Paul.
Matt,
Yep.
it's Alyssa Potts speaking.
Hold on
And-
just 1 second, Alyssa.
Sorry.
I'd let us finish up with this discussion, and before we sign off, I'll invite you to say a couple of words.
I did get the response from the engineer this afternoon at about 3:30. So I'll send that out tomorrow to Paul. It'll be put in the public meeting file for the next meeting if the extension is granted, which I think it should be, because the applicant needs an opportunity to address the concerns of the engineers. So that'll all be done tomorrow.
That's great. And then Paul and the balance of his team will work with Anchor back and forth to satisfy Anchor's objections and comments.
Yes.
So anything else from other members of the commission with regard to what they want to see at the next meeting?
I think a couple of people have asked how much these units are going to cost, and that actually hasn't been answered yet.
Okay, that's great. The applicant has that question. they seem somewhat reluctant to answer. I suspect that well, I don't want to answer for them, but I'm not sure that's something that we, well, the question has been asked and we'll see whether they answer it. But that's on your list, Andrew.
Matt, I might say the affordable housing request maybe is something we have to keep on the agenda. Maybe.
I
don't know.
agree, Alice.
I don't
And
know.
I think that we talk about the affordable housing later on in this agenda, but I think you're right. I don't want to overlook that. I think we should talk about that later in the meeting. It should absolutely stay on the agenda because I think now is a perfect time to talk about it with the rewrite of the POCD, with the town taking on the writing of the affordable housing plan. So now is a good time to talk about that. And I was going to ask Bill and his team for some comments as to who we should be speaking with regarding the POCD. But I think that's where I thought we would talk about it, is in respect to the plan of conservation development. Anything else from the commission before I invite Ms. Potts to say a few words? Okay, Alyssa, just would you say and spell your name?
Sure. Alyssa Potts, Potts. I own Fife and Drum Restaurant, but I'm just answering a quick question regarding the Kent Sewer Commission. As chairman, we only today just received the request about the potential, usage for this piece of property. So we haven't had a chance to review it. We've not seen any drawings, obviously, pertaining to what they're going to be doing. And we have not signed off on it yet. So I'm not saying it's not going to happen. It's just that we only today just received the information or the request for this building site, just to let you know.
Okay, great. Thanks, Alyssa. So I think that we should move on. I think that we've got a couple of other things to talk about tonight. And I think I have to look at the timeline that Donna sent out, and I've got it open here. So the hearing must commence within 65 days of receipt of the application, and that's been done. The hearing must be completed within 35 days. First meeting was July 8th, and the second meeting was August 12th. That's 35 days. The applicant can consent to one or more extensions as long as such extension shall not be longer than 65 days. So the commission granted an extension until from last meeting to this meeting, which was 27 days. We can grant another extension to our next regular meeting. And the total of that would be 61 days within the 65 days. So we would have to close the hearing on the 14th. Or we would have to have a special meeting within a couple of days after that. After that, we have 65 days to make a decision, which means that if we close the public hearing on the 14th, we would need to make a decision by the 16th, which is the 16th of December, which is just after our regular December meeting. So, Paul, is it my understanding that you are going to grant an extension or request an extension for us to grant?
Yes, correct. Whatever the formal wording is, we agree.
If you could send me an email, just like the one that you sent me last month, then I'll put it in the record.
Yep.
Okay, so then I would look for a motion to continue the public hearing to our next regularly scheduled meeting.
So moved.
Thanks, Mark.
Second.
Thanks, Adam. Any further discussion? Anything else that the commission wants to be? We're going to have to close this in a month. So if there's anything that you want the applicant to do, okay. So I think that's it. So there's a motion on the table and duly seconded, and I would call the vote. All those in favor, so signify by raising your hand and or saying aye. Aye. So that's unanimous. Motion carries.
Thank you for the time of the commission and the neighbors who showed up tonight and all the residents. Thank you.
Yes, thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And yeah, we as the commission really appreciate the nature of the conversation tonight. It was cordial and everybody got a chance to talk, and that's the way I like it. Okay, so we are going to move on to agenda item 6B, which is a continuation from our meeting last month, which is the application number 77-21C, Sam Saban for James Lilly and Lily Thorne, 29 Brown Road, map 11, block 40, lot 24, construction of an in-ground pool in Horizon Line District.
Matt, before we do that, I just wanted to suggest that we move 6B5 up to 6B2 so we can allow applicants to be heard before we have discussions on the other three topics that are before it.
Great. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. I think Mark beat you to it, Alice. So all those in favor, so signify by raising your hand or saying aye. Okay, motion carries. Great. So continuing application number 77-21C. This was mostly got stuck with regard to a pretty large oak tree that was going to have to come down, or that was proposed to come down in the installation of an in-ground pool. Adam, did you get a chance to do some research, to go and look around?
I did. I honestly tried extremely hard, numerous times, going back and forth to Google Earth to make sure I could find the property with binoculars. There was one spot that I could find the property. So it's really not visible, and it's far enough away and obscure enough that regardless of how big this tree may or may not be, you really wouldn't be able to tell with your naked eye, even in the winter. It's pretty obscure.
Okay. Does any other commission members have anything that they'd like to add to that? I don't know the area well. I drove around for a little bit. I looked. I thought I found it. I would be willing to follow along with Adam's assessment that that will be difficult to see if at all. Karen, I think you said at the last meeting that you thought that it was somewhat invisible.
Yes, I do believe that to be true. And my concern was whether it could be seen at all from South Road. No, South Kent Road, going to like South Kent School, and you can't see it. I especially now. I mean, I drove down there and around. I think it's a pretty hidden spot, and I really appreciated the photos that were sent along to us showing the trees. It made me feel better.
Anybody else have any comments regarding this application? Then, Sam, I'm not sure that we need any information from you. Is there anything that you'd like to say? You're on mute. You're still on mute.
No, nothing to add at this point. I appreciate the commission doing their due diligence and checking things out, but nothing to add.
Okay, great. So if there are no further comments from the commission, I would look for a motion.
Make the motion. I'll
We
make a
have
motion.
waivers. Do you want to look at the waivers first?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah. Are there waivers?
Thanks. There are waivers. We reviewed the waivers during the last meeting, but we have to accept the waivers. And
So I think basically what they're waiving is everything except for, well, I'm not sure because they circled 7, they circled 9, and they circled 10. And I don't know if that means that they're providing that information or that that's what they want to waive.
I have to get there.
Is it, it's in last month's, the waivers, it's not in this.
Yeah, it would be in the August 12th file.
What was the agenda item number?
It probably was.
There it is, 6B6.
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 Waivers.
Waivers. Well, I think that I think they're requesting waivers for 7, 9, and 7 and 9.
Yeah, 7 and 9, and any other additional information.
Right, which means so 10, 11, 12, 13.
Yeah.
So I
Don,
would look
is
for a
there-
motion to, I'm sorry, go ahead, Adam.
I just wanted to ask Don if there was any issues with the waivers that they're asking.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Then I'll make a motion that we accept the waivers as they've applied.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Is that Wes?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Then all those in favor, so signify by raising your hand and or saying aye. Motion carries.
Thank you, Commission.
Okay,
Appreciate your time.
thanks for sticking it out, Sam. And then we go to agenda item 6B5, which has been moved up.
No, you need to approve the application. You just approved the
Yeah.
waivers.
Sorry, it's a little bit punchy now. It's, okay, sorry, I'll get it back together. So I would look for a motion to, I would look for a motion on the application itself.
So I started that motion for the waivers, so I'll make a motion that we accept application 77-21C, Sam Saban for James Lilly and Lily Thom, 29 Brown Road, map 11, block 40, lot 24, construction of an in-ground pool in Horizon Line Conservation District.
Second.
Thanks, Mark. Any further discussion? And now, all those in favor, so signify by raising your hand and or saying aye.
Aye.
Great, motion carries. Okay, agenda item 6B5, application number 90-21C, Dobson Pools for Stephen Lowy and Marina Bellica, 118 Anderson Road, map 17, block 32, lot 10, construction of in-ground pool in Horizon Line Conservation District. Donna, do you have any comments regarding this application?
No, I don't. I think Steve ended up doing a really great job. I mean, we got a packet of pictures, but when I looked at them, I was like, this looks really awesome, but I have no idea where these trees are located in this whole scheme of things. So He was very kind enough to actually pull up the site plan, and he marked on the site plan, which was added later on, so you might want to check the public meeting folder. That I added those today. So at this point in time, I don't have any issues with the application. And thank you to Jolene. She does a great job.
Great. I think, why don't we hear from the applicant? Is there anything that the applicant wants to tell us before we open up to the commission?
Sure. Can you hear me? I unmuted myself.
Thank you, Steve.
It's been a long meeting. We chose the site because it was far from the wetland on our property, relatively high ground, but not the highest ground. And there were a lot of dead and dying trees in that area anyway. And it's far from the road. So it just seemed to be the ideal site for the least impact. And we're really pleased that Donna seems to agree.
And any questions or comments from the commission? Adam, I'm going to put you on the spot again. This is just up the street from, or around the corner from you?
Adam's about
Yeah,
2 blocks away.
I've been on Stephen's property before a bunch of times, and so I know right where this is. It's really kind of a straight line away from the road behind the house. I don't think that you could possibly, I mean, I didn't get a chance to go look, but even if I drove out towards Alice's house, as the road goes up, I don't think you could ever see this property because there's a hill in between there. So I don't think you can possibly see this from any road. But like I said, I didn't actually drive around to do it, but I know, like I said, I know the property, I know right where it is. I'm up and down it all the time.
I was on Straight Road on Tuesday, and there's nothing.
So with it being a horizon line application, we're concerned with the felling of the trees. We're concerned with that the fallen trees or the resultant open space being visible as a scar from other properties and mostly from public roadways. And I think what I heard from Adam is that he doesn't think that it will be. Karen, do you have a sense of where we are?
No, I'm not sure I do. Who was a previous property owner? Maybe they could tell me and I would
Lori
figure.
Fitch.
Okay, sure. Mm-hmm.
You just muted yourself, Karen.
Sorry. Am I back?
Yeah.
You really can't even see the house from Anderson Road. So I don't think you're going to see this. I don't think you're going to see a pool. I have to apologize. I thought the photos of the trees were for the other pool site, not this one. I got that wrong, guys. Sorry.
So things have changed a little, Karen, just so you know. So you can, when you drive down the road, you can see Stephen's house. It's pretty clear. There's a barn and then the house and Stephen's sculptures out in front.
I was gonna say, I was down there on Monday and I saw the sculptures out in the lawn.
Yeah.
So I just wasn't sure it was the correct address or location.
Yeah, that's the correct location.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think you'd be able to see the pool at all.
No.
So if I could just chime in there with regard to that, we specifically chose the site because it was not visible from the road. It's almost not visible from our house, which is halfway to it or more than halfway to it. It's meant to be a destination pool.
I don't think I've ever heard of a destination pool.
I hadn't either, but someone turned me on to that expression. The idea is a pool in this part of the world is only usable 2 to 3 months a year. So if you have it right at your house, you're looking at a pool covered 9 months a year. So the idea of a destination pool is far enough from the house that it's not a blight to the owner of the pool. So kind of an interesting concept.
I like that concept.
Yeah. And there were some, there were some catalog cuts of some lighting, and I couldn't see where the lighting goes on the site plan. Is the lighting just around the pool?
Right. So we're in the early stages, and my sculptures all use low voltage 12-volt lighting. So, and the sculptures actually would power those lights if we were to use them. So it's probably just a pathway from the house to the pool. So if you're looking at the site plan, you see the back of the house, there's a three-season porch. You come out the south side of the house, and there might be a walkway to get to the pool. Like if you wanted to go there in the evening and do a nighttime swim or something. So the idea is that it would all be low voltage, kind of 1 watt or 2 watt landscape lights that face down. So that's the concept. And we're very comfortable with sticking to that. My wife loves looking at the stars, actually, so we don't want a lot of light.
They're less than 2 feet tall.
Right, correct.
You know, looking at the specs on that he gave us.
And if you drive by our house at night for a few hours, our driveway is lit, and it's all 1 watt lights lighting some hydrangeas and rows of Sharon trees, and it's very subtle and keeps you on the driveway.
And no formal path from the house down to the pool?
No, there may be stepping stones. If there's a grade, it's uphill. So if we find that it's slippery, we might put in stepping stones, but we were dissuaded from putting in a path because it'd make it very hard to mow, and there would be a fair amount of landscape, kind of traverse issues. So we might put in stepping stones, not looking for anything more formal than stepping stones.
Any other questions or comments from the commission? Oh, go ahead, Alice. I'm sorry.
Just quickly, you showed a lot of pictures, but how many trees do you think you will have to take down? Not that we'll even be able to see it, but I was just curious.
28. We've taken out about 10 dead trees that were there, 10 or 12 dead trees, and it's 28 trees with trunk diameters between 6 inches and 12 inches.
Right.
You know, diseased Scottish pine, choke cherry, stuff like that. None of it is terribly healthy. So.
We do have waivers to accept if the commission is, if we're at that point now. It looks like the applicant is requesting waivers for numbers 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 13.
I'll make a motion that we accept the waivers.
And a second?
I'll second.
You guys will have to duel it out. Okay, so all those in favor, so signify by raising your hand and/or saying aye. Okay, great. And is there any further discussion regarding the application itself? Then I would look for a motion on the application.
I'll make a motion that we accept application 90-21C Dobson Pool for Stephen Lowy and Marina Belika, 118 Anderson Road, map 17, block 32, lot 10, construction of in-ground pool in the Horizon Line Conservation District. I feel like I just read that.
Second.
Okay, motion and second. Any further discussion? Then I'll call the vote. All those in favor, so signify by raising your hand and or saying aye. And motion carries. Okay, great.
Thank you so much. My kids, thank you. They've been begging us for a pool for a decade.
Yeah.
And they're only 15. Thank you so much.
They'll be in college by the time you get it in now.
Not quite, 11th grade.
All right, be good.
Thanks a lot, appreciate it.
Yepper. Okay, so back to 6B2. And this is the clarification of the role and responsibility of the Architecture Review Board. So this comes up from, I asked Don to put this on the agenda at the last meeting because there was some concern that there wasn't enough direction given to the Architecture Review Board. They didn't have enough tools to be able to review and or approve the architecture of the new developments and the new buildings that were going in. I think that depending on what happens with the application that we just looked at earlier in the meeting, the responsibility of their Architecture Review Board is going to be an important one. It's going to continue to be important, especially if the Architecture Review Board has already gone through and looked at all the documents and given a thumbs up to the way that the buildings look in the conservation subdivision. But we know that they're going to have to review each plan as it comes forward. In this case, they're going to have the benefit of the homeowners association of the restricted covenants. But I guess what I want to know from the commission is, do we think that we should continue along? Do we think that the Architecture Review Board has enough information, and that the guidelines are defined enough for them to do their job well? Should we hire somebody to define the parameters of their approval, or should we simply hire a consultant to take over that responsibility? Which in our regulations allow for the I can't remember what it's called, but they allow for us to hire a consultant to review the architecture within the VR1 and VR2 districts. So that's
where is the Architecture Review Board codified?
It's in the VR district section of the zoning regs. So it starts out. Hold on, I've got that note, David. Section 5100. Sorry, Donna.
Oh, that's okay. Page 73.
So the way I look at it is that there's the Architecture Review Board is meant to review an application in accordance with section 5100, specifically 5110, 5130, and 5150. And also in accordance with the Kent Village District Architecture Review Board pre-application, where there's a 7-page document that was mostly put together by John Milnes Baker, which it talks about the very specific ideals of fenestration and eave structure. It's well thought out, but it's somewhat narrow in its scope.
I thought I remembered, Matt, that you were going to actually meet with the Architecture Review Board to sit and chat with them about what issues they're currently having with regard to the abilities that they currently have to make decision and to move on application. Remember that they couldn't get a quorum, and then everything just kind of exploded, and then this came up. And then now Steve Penner is off the board.
Oh, did Steve finally leave? His
term ended, and he chose not to remain on at this point in time.
I suspected that was going to happen. So I requested a meeting with the Architecture Review Board, and they
couldn't get a quorum or something.
They couldn't get a quorum, and then they decided that they didn't want to meet. They didn't want to meet via Zoom because they thought it was too much of a public forum, and so we never got it together. So I haven't met with them. I did meet with one member who expressed this concern to me, that member felt that he didn't have enough information. He didn't have the tools that he needed. It seems to me that the review tools are here in the special district, in the Kent Village Overlay District. So maybe the next step is for me to try to get together with that group again and just talk about what the charge is and see whether, and maybe they can explain to me what they need, what they want, what would make their job easier.
I'd like the time to be able to review the architectural design standards in the Kent Village District guidelines. I have to find them. I honestly spent so much time reading letters, I didn't really look at this carefully enough.
Are those on the website somewhere?
That's what I'm looking at right now.
The ARB
Yes,
pre-application.
If you go in under forms and documents, under the town's website, there's the Architecture Review Board pre-application. And that takes in the required documents and helpful suggestions. And they're considering it a primer. But if there's, it is, I would think that if I was going to be going to the ARB and I had to read what had been created, for me as a layperson, it would be very confusing. So I remember working with the ARB when they came in to redo the PACCO, the mobile gas station, and the difficulty we had getting the applicant to understand exactly what it was that the commission was, or the board was looking for. And then at that point in time, they had talked about the possibility of trying to narrow down those guidelines. And then John, who was the creator of them, resigned, and it's just been stagnant ever since. So I think maybe a joint meeting, special, and I hate to do a special meeting with everything that's going on with the POCD and everything else. But maybe it would be beneficial to have a special meeting between the two, between the ARB and the Planning and Zoning Commission, so that they can understand what your expectations are of them based on the guidelines and the regulations that are currently in place.
I guess I would be in favor of a meeting. I would be happy to, meet with them at their next meeting, which is, it's probably not until the beginning of October, right?
October 5th.
And then go through the very specifically, if the commission is amenable, I would go through very specifically sections 51, 10, 5130, and 5150. So 5110 talks about the intent of the regulations is to maintain the existing village scale, preserve historic and significant structures, encourage pedestrian activity. 5130. No, I just closed it. Sorry, I'm gonna have to reopen it. But rather than belabor it, I would be happy to join them at their meeting and then report back with a brief report at our next regular meeting.
So Matt, I'll join you in that meeting.
Well, you're my hero, Wes.
I'll go with you.
Awesome, thank you.
Did something happen that they all of a sudden asked for this? I mean, they've been around for 10 years at least. Was there a situation?
I think, Anne, they were reacting to my request to talk to them about the decisions that they made regarding the Morrison Gallery. And while I didn't criticize them, I don't think that I did. But I wanted to be sure that they understood what our expectations were for them when Billy went back to them with the change that he had made to the southern corner window and the front facade of the building. And I listened to their meeting, and they weren't quite sure that they were allowed to make suggestions. And I think I'll leave it at that. So I think it was a reaction to me.
You're
Wes,
muted,
you're on,
Wes. There
mute.
you go.
Mute. The only guidelines are the ones that are in that pre-application. It's kind of like a combination of hand-drawn things, like those 5 pages. That's it.
Those are the architectural guidelines, and then there's the administrative guidelines are in the regulations, and then there's also a state statute that actually allows an architectural review board or a consultant. It's one or the other, and then the commission chooses which way they want to go.
Right. These seem pretty vague and subjective in a lot of ways. I guess if I were a applicant approaching this, like, get your eaves right, and that's about all that's listed in here.
And I think that was part of the problem. Like, I don't think that they really took into consideration the existing surrounding architectural design.
Yeah.
I think while John is super when it comes to design, I think he was trying to get too far into the minutia, and that was making the people feeling a little bit overwhelmed and not really understanding what it was that the commission wanted or the board wanted.
Yes, because I would imagine in this hypothetical subdivision, there's no other things around there that they're going to be reviewing this relative to, which makes it like, would they be expected to enforce architecture relative to homeowners association guide to design? Or it just seems very difficult to understand how this would apply in that case, for example.
Yeah, and that's why I think that it's important to take those design guidelines in the application and couple them with the design considerations that are listed in the regulations for the Kent Village District, and as Donna said, how those get codified.
All right, so I will shoot Ellen off an email and tell her that we will, there will be a meeting October 5th. And they meet at 5:30. Is that good for you, Matt, or not good, or Wes, 5:30?
That's fine with me.
Okay,
October 5th, Donna, Tuesday?
it's a Tuesday, it's the first Tuesday of the month.
Yeah, I can manage that.
Okay, all right.
I mean, even if it's going to be on Zoom, right? So even if I have to just take it from Golden's Bridge, I can do that.
Okay. Okay,
All
all
right,
right,
so-
I'll take care of that and set it up.
Okay, good. So before I do that, let me jump back into the agenda. So 6B3, and this is the clarification of the baseline operations and aspirations of Club Getaway. David's been, as we've been looking at his picture for several hours now. So let's get into that and talk about the document that David put together, and then I think we should decide as a commission on how we want to proceed. Broadly, do we want to create a regulation that fits with what David is doing? Do we want to just have a document that shows his baseline and leave him as a pre-existing non-conforming? So why don't I turn this over to Donna first, if you've got any comments, Donna, and then David can jump in and tell us what he thinks.
And I saw Glenn today. He stopped by my office. He was meeting with Connie Manis with regard to the POCD. And we started talking about when we changed the regulation, how the definition of a club some way or another had disappeared. Whether it was intentional or not, neither one of us could remember. Whether or not this was something that we had decided that we were going to purposely drop and then see if we couldn't get David's business to fit in somewhere else, which it doesn't. Or if it was something that we were supposed to act on as a result of that, and we just never did. So I don't really like to create nonconformities. I don't think that's really what the planning and zoning is meant to do. So my recommendation would be to try to create some kind of a category with a description, and then use the baseline that's been submitted so that there aren't any nonconformities, because that means then that anything that he wants to do there would not be a special permit, but it would actually be a variance through ZBA. And I don't think that that's where we want to go with this. So that was why I had asked David to put together a new baseline so that we could figure out how we can just at least create a definition and then put that use as a special permitted use back into the rural district. So that's where I'm at.
Okay. So David, you're up. You're on mute.
Sorry, I've been listening. So Donna asked me on, I guess it was last week, to put together a baseline. I wasn't 100% sure what everybody was looking for. So what I did is I did a very high level document. What we do, what my goal is, what my objectives are, what really it's 3 different business units are that we have, and what falls into those 3 business units. I could go over it. You tell me how you would like me to proceed. I can go over this document. If you've read the document and you have very specific questions, you want to get more into nitty gritty, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Whatever works best.
So the document, the high level document that you put together, David, is that is what you guys do in most cases?
That is what we do.
And there's no wish list on that with regard to what you might want to do in the future. That's what you do. That's That's how you currently operate.
This is my operation right here.
Okay.
Everything we did. The only change that I made in 2020 is we started doing Airbnb some cabins because I just needed to figure out a way to make some money. But that's really the only difference to what I've done in a year. This year we won't be Airbnb cabins.
I have a
That's
question.
good.
I don't know that the document is great, and I get to understand more about Club Getaway, but I think for us to write a regulation, we I guess we just need more information or a better understanding of who your clientele is.
Mm-hmm.
And how they stay there, because we're gonna have to create if we decide we're gonna create a regulation, we're gonna have to do so in a way that encompasses all of that.
Right. So, I mean, I could go through each one of those business units, who my clientels are, or, what we do on that. So for my first business unit, and truly, Club Getaway's bread and butter is our youth program. We do, with our youth program, we see schools. In May and June, we see schools that come, it's their graduation trips. We're contracted with the New York City Department of Education. We are contracted with several other school districts in Connecticut, in New Jersey, and they come up here and they're either spending a day up at Club Getaway, and the way that I sell it is based on meals. So they're either doing an extended day trip, which is lunch and dinner, a day trip, which is just lunch, or an overnight trip where they're sleeping in cabins and it's breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I'm sorry, lunch, dinner, and breakfast. They're only here for one day, for a little bit less than 24 hours. And then they leave and then another group comes in. We could see at any given time on a Monday through Friday in May and June, anywhere to 600 to 800 kids during the day on the property.
Wow.
And then again, this is all pre-COVID right now. This is 2019. We then then in the youth program in July and August, we are the overnight facility. We run two sort of programs back to back, and this is one of the questions with aspirations. We traditionally have always seen camp programs up here Monday through Friday, so day camps, park and recs, programs that come up to Club Getaway, and that we're the overnight program for these people, for the campers. And we take care of the activities, we take care of the meals, the entertainment, everything with the kids. And but we're not the camp counselors. My counselors do not sleep in the cabins with the kids. They don't deal with the social emotional issues that the kids are going to have. And then they're usually here no more than 2 nights, 3 days. We then, during the time, and what I did this year, Monday through Friday, coinciding with the camp program, we also offered family camps. Family camps were here at the same point because, again, I didn't, camps are under their own Board of Health. Can they travel? Can they not travel? So they weren't making decisions until June or July this year on what they could do because of their own state regulations. So we offered family camps that came up. So these are families that come up, and that's part of my retail program. They came up, it could be anywhere, family of 4, family of 5. And so at the same time, coinciding, we're sort of acting as a resort, an all-inclusive. We're sort of like a cruise ship with the family camps. Every Monday through Friday, we're running the family program, each activity, every meal. We have our Monday meal, Tuesday meal, Wednesday meal, Thursday meal, and then those families would leave on Friday. My retail program also coincides, well, I'm jumping around, going back to the youth program. The youth program we also do in the fall, we do a lot of outdoor education. We do a lot of team building, team bonding. We have schools that come to us that we're contracted with that will come in and do, their orientation, their freshman orientation, their senior orientation, how they're going to be peer leaders, and things like that. And that's really our Monday, that's our youth program. The retail program will consist of my family camp, which now is Monday through Friday, and what I just talked about, as well as my camp getaway for adults. My camp getaway for adults will probably run about 13 to 15 weekends a year, give or take, where we're, it's what it is. It's camp for adults. We're running a camp program. The adults arrive, we'll have anywhere from 200 to 320 guests stay on the property. They arrive Friday at 5:30. And will depart on Sunday at 4 p.m. Activities during that time period will, it's all sorts of our adventure activities. I listed all the activities. On top of that, the bar is open, and we'll have, entertainment would consist of a DJ, would consist of a band. That's really it with our retail program. Let me just see on that with the retail programs. The other thing that I've done in the past with retail programs is open up day trips. So just sell it, come in for the day, take advantage of the activities. We include meal involved in that. And normally it's a 1 meal trip where they depart, where they have lunch, and then we'll depart at around 4 o'clock. That could coincide with a family camp program or coincide with a club getaway, camp getaway for adults program. The one, this program is my white label partner program. And I did watch the meeting that took place, the last meeting, once Donna told me that you wanted me to present, I did. One of the ways that I'm scaling Club Getaway is by creating programs that could be taken across the country, right? Not just on this property here. So part of what I've done in that is that places that have people that have a certain, well, I'll give you a perfect example. This weekend, starting tomorrow, we have our camp. John Waters is here. John Waters is a film producer that has sort of a really loyal, dedicated following. That's a program that we started back in 2017. I'm partnering with John Waters on this particular program. And he, one of our goals is that we're going to take that program across the country. So not necessarily on Club Getaway's property, but that's going to go scale across the country. And we're doing that with several other programs and events that we're doing here. And that's my white label partner programs. What I define some of that, why it's a white label partner program where Club Getaway is generating its revenue is based on registrations and sponsorships. That's how I generate the revenue. And then I'm partnering with then I'm sharing that revenue with a partner on that event. As opposed to a private event, and what I define a private event is where I'm contracted with somebody and that they're paying me directly. And that could be a wedding, a corporate event, or even a private white labeled camp, like Camp Ivy, or a camp where somebody wants to run a camp. They want to be able to scale it themselves, and we're providing a white label program for them, taking care of that camp for that.
So is that like the Gilmore Girls? Would the Gilmore Girls be included in that private event?
So yeah, so what the Gilmore Girls are doing this year is that they are, well, the Gilmore Girls is a little bit of we're acting as a hotel. In the past, the Gilmore Girls, what we did is we opened up as a hotel, basically. We offered we had no vested interest in the Gilmore Girls whatsoever, except that we were their preferred lodging because we were the only lodging that was around. And I made a deal with her that, look, you put me on your website as your preferred lodging, and I'll pay you an 8% commission on who, on anyone that comes in. This year, we are going to be hosting the Gilmore Girls here at Club Getaway. We already sold the rooms and she's paying me. So it's sort of a hybrid. She's paying me to use the property. So she's using my tents, she's using my, our food service. And then I'm discounting her based off of that 8% commission that she's getting. Does that make sense?
So
That's an interesting arrangement.
So will you be advertising this on your website then? What I'm getting at, is this gonna be a special event?
So the Gilmore Girls, I'm not advertising on my website because I am 100% sold out of cabins. So there's no reason. She did the advertising for me. So I made the revenue based on the cabins, and then and then basically with the commission that I'm paying her, she's using that money to rent the tent so that she could utilize the tent and the services that we offer.
Okay.
So David,
yes.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. You go ahead, and then I'll ask my question after.
No, so I mean, Donna, one of the things that you brought up, and this is a question I brought up at that special meeting, is what is considered a special event? I think for me, that clarification would be very important because I don't want to get into a place where I'm selling something and then all of a sudden find out that that's a special event. In the sake of, and then I have to go through the process, and then I have to unsell it, or I have to, renege on our contract or do something like that.
Right.
And that's where that was very confusing to me. And so I think that's a question I'm asking everybody.
Yeah, well, I think the trouble is that we, as a commission, from a land use perspective, weren't really sure what you were doing on a regular basis. And the festival that we had, a month ago or so, didn't seem to fall into your regular operation for us. So my question, the question I was going to ask a minute ago was, how would you consider that festival to be a private event, a private white label camp?
So to be that festival itself, technically falling under this definition, would have been a private event. My revenue was generated directly from the festival organizer. With that being said, it would never have fallen under my, and I mentioned this in the special meeting, that it would have never fallen as something of my normal use, because I would have never really sold something like that before, if I wasn't in survival mode, where I'm in right now.
And I think that's where I think that's where we're at, is that if you wouldn't normally do it, then it's a special event. And that's kind of why we want to codify what it is that you normally do. And then I think we have to go a little bit further to say, okay, this is what you normally do, but how do you normally do it? Like, what are your hours of operation? How long do you play music on a Friday and Saturday night? Where do you play music on a Friday and Saturday night? So that we don't, I think the biggest objection from, let me take that back. The biggest concern is the noise at night when it's dark. So I think this is a really good, for me, this is a really good start, because it tells us what it is you're doing. And then this or some modification of this can become our baseline. We can use this to somewhat get you back into the fold, as it were, with some rules of operation. Like, the commission would never say to somebody that they could operate a private business until 3 o'clock in the morning on as a general rule. Right, we would say, you're allowed to, like when the public schools come and they want to put the private schools want to put lights on. We say those lights have to go off by 9 o'clock. You can't play sports after 9 o'clock. So those are the kinds of things that I'm interested in codifying.
Other than the business model, would there be any difference between the festival and a raucous wedding from the perspective of the commission?
Well, I don't have an answer for that. I don't know. I mean, so we've had weddings before that, we do under a tent. I've had 3 weddings this year. I have 8 weddings on the book for next year. We normally have in our contract that if the music goes on after 11:30, I believe it is, it's outside. It's up to, I think in my contract, and I have to double check, it's $500 every 15 minutes as a penalty to that person, to the bride and groom. We do though, and this is something that we do operate. We operate a nightclub. We operate that nightclub until 2 o'clock in the morning. There's never, I don't want to say never, but we do get, I got my neighbors who are on talking terms now did email me and said, just the other at 11:45, the music's too loud, and we turned it down. But that is part of our normal operation, is that we'll operate the nightclub until 2 a.m. And at 2 a.m. that gets shut down.
You obviously serve alcoholic beverages. Do you sell them, or do people that you bring in sell them? Serve alcohol beverages.
We do serve alcohol. Yes, we sell alcohol.
And you sell it as well.
Well, we sell, so we have a cafe liquor license.
Okay.
So we sell alcohol. Yeah. We had a special outing liquor permit that now is transferred over to a cafe permit.
David,
so we don't sell retail. We don't sell bottles or anything like that. We sell drink per drink.
You said the state considers you a resort. Is that
correct?
Do I remember that correctly?
That is correct. Yes. So we are a resort. We pay resort sales tax. So we're paying a sales tax of 15%.
So Donna, I'm wondering if we can find. I'm trying to think of how we start this. How do we start to create a regulation and work with David on crafting it? And I'm wondering or I'm assuming that there must be some regulations somewhere about resorts. I don't know if there's another town here in the Northwest corner that has something along those lines, or the COG, but I'm trying to think of a way that starts this for us, and it may cover a lot of concerns that we have.
There was a definition at one point in time for a resort in the regulations, and that was removed in May of 2005. And then what was instead in May of 2005 was a definition of the word club. The use of land, including structures, for its member and guests accompanying them solely for recreational, social, fraternal, patriotic, political, benevolent, or athletic purposes. And that's what was in our regulations until we rewrote our regulations. And then that's the definition that disappeared. So they were considered a club.
I don't think they are. David doesn't have members. I mean, it's not like a golf club or a hunt club. I don't think it's a club.
I agree with that.
Yeah. So Donna, one thing that, and I do know, and I know this from Victor, the previous owner, one of his operations, which was based off of Club Med, was that he did, as part of the registration, there was a $5 club fee that was included. So once you registered, you were part of the club. If you came back again, you would have a $5 discount because you already paid that club fee.
Right.
not knowing of the zoning regulations or anything like that, and I don't know what happened before, I just thought it was silly, and I said, I'm not doing that,
Right.
but.
Right, and I think that's where it came
But-
from.
I
Is there
think
any reason we couldn't look at extending the camp definition with special permit? Because 90% of what he does is listed in there.
In camp, they can't be alcohol, right?
That's
There.
why I'm
Right.
saying, would it be extended, or are we limited to the definition of camp with some Uber oversight beyond our regulations? I mean, it's camp for adults. They spend the night. They have recreation. They do athletics.
I guess I feel like it's more than a camp. I think it's more of a resort. I think the definition resort was taken out of our regs because nobody thought about Club Getaway being a resort. They were thinking of it, like you were just saying, as a camp, not thinking about everything that can happen there, everything that David may want to do going forward there. It seems a little more like a resort to me.
But would you prefer a resort for kids or a camp for adults?
Oh,
I don't know. I don't know. But I feel like it's different than what our summer camps are.
Yeah,
I
mean,
feel-
summer camps are a big part of this program based on what we're reading.
well, it is. It's part of our program. But again, it's not. We're not. I'm not regulated as a camp by the state. Like I'm not defined. There's a specific state camp license that's done by the Office of Early Childhood. That I am not a camp for several reasons that we're not a camp. And I don't believe that I'm ever going to go get a camp license. That's not something that I'm looking to possibly do in the future, is to go back. I mean, I was a camp director before buying Club Getaway. I was a camp director for 15 years. I don't know if I'm going back into that direction. Again, COVID really changed everything for us, right? I mean, COVID, my whole social distancing is the polar opposite of what Club Getaway is. So that just, my 2020 was destroyed, and 2021, when we lost the school business, and now in the spring and the fall was, we made it up in the summer, but we had to be creative, and in some ways stupidly creative.
Back in, this is actually the 1995 regulations. The resort definition is an establishment providing lodging, dining, and recreational facilities, or any combination for profit or non-profitable charitable basis, and catering to families and persons over the age of 18.
So
that's
the
what
only
he's-
thing you'd
that's
have
what
to
he's doing.
change there is catering to people over the age of 18.
Right.
For, in order to fit with what David is currently doing.
Right.
Well, no, I think we'd also have to add, because he's doing all of those things, and he's catering to children, to school age kids. He is the day trips from the schools, and sometimes they spend the night. So we'd have to add that to that, but that would be easy.
Yeah, I okay. I mean, which we can fool around with the language. But it's yes, and I think we should. So I think that we are all sort of leaning towards trying to make a definition and make it a permitted by special permit use, right? So I think we're on the right track. I think we have to have further conversations about the biggest complaint from the neighbors. And I know that David's been doing what he's doing for a long, long time, but the noise is something that I think that we have to discuss and come to a compromise with David about how long he's going to have the music, or where he should have the music, or just have that discussion. I think we've got time to do that, though. I mean, we're coming up on, we're in September. David, when do you generally, you told us this, but remind me, I've got it right here.
So we would
October.
start our operations again, we would restart up on basically May 1st is when we start up again.
So we've got until October 31st, right? So your operating season is from May 1st to October 31st. And I would suggest that David continue to operate the way he's been operating now. And we can continue this conversation over the next meeting or two and try to come up with something that works for all of us and get it in for next season. And, I don't want to change too much around for David to maybe making his plans for next year. But that's I guess what I would suggest, so we can maybe get off the topic for tonight. Is that reasonable?
Would you want me to for the next meeting, or for your own, really break this up into more detail? I mean, we run a pretty stringent program, especially for my retail programs, as far as, the timing, everything that we do. I could expand upon this. It was just a matter of timing that I just kept a very high level and sort of I wasn't 100% sure what everyone is looking for.
I have a question, because
sure,
what can happen for anybody who wants to create a use or create something is they come before us and they create an application. And then we take that application and we work it and change it and massage it so that it works for the commission. And so I'm just wondering, do we want to see if David wants to speak to a land use attorney or speak to somebody like Glenn Calder and create a regulation that he feels works for Club Getaway, and let him bring that to us? I mean, ideally, that's the way this should go.
I'd be happy to. I mean, I think at the end of the day, all I'm doing is showing to you what I do, right? Like, this is just what I do. This is my business. This is how we make money. This is how we operate. This is exactly what we do. I'd be happy to speak, have an attorney come in and go more details on that. But I'd be open and listen. I'm very happy because to know when I would need to come to the commission to do something different, right? Like if I had an idea, something, I hate bringing up that event, but it makes me sick to my stomach. But if I'm doing something that's just out of the norm, that I'm coming to as something that I know I need to come to the commission and say, look, this is what I'm doing at this time. I don't, this is, I know if I do something, if I'm going to piss off the neighbors, that I know it, right? I know what I'm going to do. And when I signed that contract, I said to myself, I said to my wife, I'm making a mistake right now. But I was assured on certain assurances, and I knew I was making a mistake. I didn't think I was doing anything wrong because I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew it was a mistake. And I saw survival there. As far as moving forward, I mean, the document that I gave you, this is my normal business operations. What am I aspiring to? We run a very good business here when it's non-COVID, right? My next aspiration is going to try to create buildings that are, climate resilient, right? In the last couple of years, we've had nothing but, we've had 2 tornadoes that came through. We had 2 tropical storms, and we're part of our shelter are tents. So that's my next big project, is that we need to build a building that would be, noise would be something to, noise would be great because it'll block all the noise, but it'll also help with, that we have a place to, shelter. God forbid there is a problem here and I have 300 people on the property.
I just want to say, I didn't mean to imply you needed to bring an attorney in. I meant that, like a land use attorney or Donna certainly could recommend to you somebody to create a regulation to
Right.
create a regulation, you're coming to us, this is the regulation I want you to put onto onto your regs. And we're going to take it and then we're going to do something to it. You know, we're going to massage it. We're going
Massage
to
it.
right. But I mean, and that's a normal thing. People have something, they want to create an application, they want a car wash, whatever it is. And they come to us with regulation. Maybe this whole thing works better letting David create something rather than all of us spending 20, 30 minutes over how many meetings trying to create something that David can create and bring to us.
So I had envisioned something much simpler, that we would have a definition. And so we started out with a definition of a resort. So we could as a commission look at that old definition and maybe put that back in, and then maybe just have resort as a use permitted by special permit in the regulations in the rural zone. And then from there, that's where I think David comes in with a, you know, we do somewhat of a modified special permit application, where then he applies for something. And I know he's already doing it. He said, because and it's not that we're going to not approve what he comes up with, but we can come up with conditions like, these are your hours of operation. It's, this is what size vehicles you can use along the road. This is how many people you can have in, and all of those things I think are going to follow along generally with what David has outlined in this high level description of his operation. And we'll come and then we'll have it. We'll have a, what do we call it?
Meeting?
No.
Having done this
The
once
application, we'll have a
before-
motion to approve the application, right? And then it'll be on the record.
Having done this once before, it seems like we had to come forth with a definition, and then it was actually a regulation that was crafted to support it. It wasn't just the line farm brewery. It was these are the things that are required for the brewery.
Yeah, we had the definition of a farm brewery, and then underneath in the use section, it talked about minimum acreage,
All that stuff,
hours, how many barrels you could do, the percentage of product that you have to buy within a certain mile radius. Those were the criteria that the commission added when we made brewery a special permitted use. You can do it that way. You just put the definition of resort in the definitions, or whatever it is that you want to define, and then you can be specific in the special permitted use. Or not. That was the way that the commission was comfortable at the time when the brewery came forward. And I think that was really based on what people were discussing at the public hearings. And I think that's what drove the addition of those bulleted points underneath the use in the special permit section. But, we can do it either way. I don't think it's necessary for David to come before us to ask us to do this. This is something that the commission, I believe, should be the driving force on, because it's not in our regulations. And in order for us to eliminate a nonconformity, it would be up to us to do that. I think that, between David and I putting our heads together, looking for definitions of resorts, seeing if there's any other towns that are doing something that are similar, I think we could probably come up with something together. And then if he wants to show it to his attorney, then that's where he would bring the attorney in at that point in time. And then use the, he could fine tune what he's created with a little bit more specific information. And then that would be the baseline that we would be working off of. And then anytime he wants to change that baseline, he would need to come back in for a modification to that special permit.
But he would still have to apply for the initial special permit and go through that process.
Right.
With the public hearings and all that fun.
The only thing that I would add to that is that our commission would probably enlist Glenn, at least for his opinion, Glenn Chalder, at least for his opinion on the definition after you and David have worked together, Donna.
Sure.
We could, maybe enlist Glenn to review at least.
I guess my question is, if so he basically has a grandfathered use. We need to create something so there's not a non-conformity.
I don't think he has a grandfathered use, because I think the use that was created when Victor Fink owned it is not what Club Getaway is now. I think that it has evolved and has changed with the times. So I don't think, I mean, if you look at the baseline that was agreed to in 1983, it's nothing. Well, I mean, it's similar, but it's really not the same. I mean, the 1983 baseline they had horseback riding around the lake. I mean, so that's what needs to be updated. And that's why if we get the baseline at this point in time, and then he wants to make the changes, then that's when the modifications would roll.
I agree with that. There should be no question that what David is doing currently there should be no question that what David is doing currently is allowed by the regulations.
Right.
Right. And we just have to tweak.
Exactly that.
Yeah. We have to tweak, I'll say it again, the hours of operation. I think that's really that's the big thing. So Donna and David, are you comfortable both with moving forward within those parameters that we just discussed?
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And if not, we'll wing it.
Just keep us in the loop.
Yeah.
Will do.
Yeah.
All right.
We'll figure it out.
Donna, I'll call you on Monday.
Okay. That
All
sounds good. Yes. Sounds great.
And before you guys go, is there any other comments from the commission?
Yeah, I have a question. And when you're having this discussion, so maybe this happens again to somebody 5 or 6 years from now, if ownership changes again, and somebody's interpretation of what they are doing is different again, how do we protect this? This doesn't seem like the way we really like to run planning and zoning. We like to have a regulation, and then of course there's special permits. But I just, in your conversation in coming up with this, think about if he decides to hell with this business, I'm not doing it anymore. And somebody comes in and they want to just, grow cows or something. I normally a permit goes with the property. So.
Right, and that permit would be filed on the land records.
That didn't happen in this case.
It didn't, because the statutes were different back then.
Yeah, but I know, I hear you.
Statutes have changed. The special permit would get filed on the land records, so that if he were to sell it, when they come in to do their due diligence, and they look at the land records, they would see what the special permit says and what they're allowed to do.
Right.
And then that's when they would have to come to us and say, we like his plan, but we'd like to tweak a little bit. How do we do that? I think that's the protection that you've got in place, is because that special permit will be on the land records.
And I agree with Alice. Alice, your point is well taken. That's and that's the process that's what I'm hoping to get out of this, is that there's this, that you can go into the file and say, okay, that piece of property, this is what it says they're allowed to do, and we can go back and say, okay, that's great. What you're doing there is not, or what you want to do there is different. So I agree wholeheartedly. And I'll remind the commission that we have to do this very same thing for the senior housing in town, and in the rural district. So we took the convalescent home out, and so So,
Not
Morning
senior
Star,
housing,
Morningside,
but
and all of
convalescent.
those. Yeah,
Mm,
all those places are now pre-existing non-conforming, and we really should
Right.
bring them back into the fold too.
Exactly.
That's another day. Please.
Not tonight?
August, but how about September, October of 2022?
Okay, thank you, David.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Have a good night.
Okay, you too. Okay, 6B4 for all you pot smokers. This is the Responsible and Equitable Regulation of Adult Use Cannabis Act, the RARACA.
Right. So, you know that it's now legal in Connecticut. It's probably not going to take effect until January. I'm thinking of 2023, the end of 2022. By the time they end up putting everything in place that they need to put in place. In the meantime, the commission has to determine what they want to do with regard to the sale of cannabis. A lot of towns have been doing moratoriums. I would say that a majority of the towns that I have checked with, they've been doing moratoriums. There have been a couple who have actually approved its use and defined where it could be sold within in their particular towns. And then there are some that have just come right out and said, no, it's not happening. It's never going to happen. And, go move somewhere else. So one of the things that Mike had advised on numerous occasions is to never do a moratorium. Because if you don't stick with a moratorium and the moratorium ends, and by the time you change your regulation, somebody sneaks in there, you don't have any protection. And at that point in time, the legislation says that the sale of cannabis would be considered similar to any other, it would be considered like another use that's similar. And then they used liquor sales as an example. And we don't regulate liquor sales, we regulate retail. So they would be able to go anywhere that retail is approved. My recommendation, and even after talking to Mike, is that at this point in time, what we do is we just change the definition of retail stores to add after the word ammunition, cannabis or cannabis products as defined in Public Act number 21-1, June special session. And then as it evolves and the law becomes active, then the commission can have a better discussion to see what other towns are doing so that they can decide exactly what and how the town wants to handle it instead of being pressured into doing it right now. So this is kind of a quick fix to protect the town from one opening up at 27 North Main Street, where there's not enough parking or and the traffic flow would be, I don't know if anybody has driven past the Great Barrington one, but you go past there on a Thursday night or a Friday afternoon and the cars are all the way around the building and so are the people. You don't have that luxury. So I think that doing it this way, we're protected until we can see what everybody else is doing, how the law is actually being enforced, and what other towns that are similar to ours are doing.
I like the idea, and I want to add that there are 3, or there's 4 already in Great Barrington.
Actually, there's 5, but I don't know that for
There
a
you
fact.
go.
There's 5 retail places? Yeah.
And they are all within, some of them are within a mile of each other. Some of them a little bit more.
So does anybody, do any of the commissioners have an objection to setting a public hearing to review this, the revisions to the definition of retail stores?
No, I think it's a good idea. I think Donna's proposal is a very good one.
It's good because we're not deciding now whether it's something that we like or don't like, but we are deciding that we don't know what its impacts are, and this will give us time to figure that out.
Donna, the thing that you submitted, the Southbury guide,
Oh, yeah, you know who did that?
who?
Di.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
does this mean does this mean they've made all those decisions or that we're not ready to make?
They've actually they've done a moratorium.
Oh, that's what this means. Oh,
Right.
okay.
Yep.
All right.
So this is what they handed out just as an explanation.
Right.
And I thought it was great. You
Yeah,
know,
it
I
is.
mean, I thought she did an awesome job.
Yeah.
And so I asked her if I could use it and she sent it to me. So that's, you know, it's something that we could just keep in the file and use later on if we want to. But Southbury was one of the towns that went to a 6-month moratorium. Some towns did I think Litchfield announced today at the COG meeting that they did a 1-year moratorium. You know, I mean, I'm just, with everything else that we have on our plates right now, I just don't think, I think that this is something that could fall through the cracks. I've already gotten a couple of phone calls. You know, where can I go? What can I do? I found a spot. Would I be able to, you know, we need to figure out what we want to do. And I think this is the cleanest way to just pay attention and then craft what we really want to craft.
So I think we need a motion then to allow Donna to set a public hearing.
Made.
Second.
Great. Okay. Any more discussion?
And could
All
only
those
have
in
one
favor?
dispensary, right?
Wait, I'm sorry, David, go ahead.
Could only ever have one dispensary with the current law?
Yeah, one for one dispensary or cultivator within for a population of 25,000.
Yeah, so we'd be limited to
less.
one even if we did allow it. Okay.
And you know, I mean, the thing is, people are asking, well, can we combine towns? Can we say that this, you know, we're going to take, you know, Kent and Warren and we're going to do, you know, Sharon, Cornwall, and combine it all together. And so that maybe we could get 3 or 4, but you can't. It's the population of the town individual.
Yeah. Okay.
Are there regulations as far as how close it can be to a school?
There are state regulations that will cover that. That's going to be coming out of the Department of Consumer Protection, which they haven't set up yet.
Okay. There's a motion and a second. And I'll call the vote. All those in favor, so signify by raising your hand and or saying aye. Motion carries.
Thanks.
Great. Okay. Agenda item 7A, the staff report. There's nothing there. Donna, does that mean that that there's nothing there?
Yeah, I don't really have anything to report.
Okay, great. Then agenda item 8A is the Plan of Conservation and Development Subcommittee. And we had a meeting with Glenn where we, you guys all saw the minutes. You all saw the minutes. The survey's out. And as of the last time I looked, there was not quite 350 respondents.
Yeah, 348 as of this morning.
Are they anonymous?
Yes.
The survey's pretty good. It's easy to use. And
Yeah, when Glenn was here today, he actually pulled up all the graphs so that I could see what some of the answers were. Pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. Yeah. You know, there's a couple of things that he's going to have that he'll have to fine tune because there really wasn't a it was kind of an either or, you know, and it was like a agrees, a strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree. And, you know, so he said that he's going to kind of have to massage a little bit of the information. But he's very pleased with the amount of responses that we've gotten so far. It's going to be in the Spectrum. I believe tomorrow. The Lakeville Journal is going to be putting something in tomorrow. The woman from the Spectrum had said that she would anticipate that the Danbury Times would also pick up the article from the Spectrum, so it'll be in that. And it was funny. A lot of people had said, you know, they had gotten the information from Facebook. So, you know, I can bump that up, and you know, I'm working with the woman over in Templeton Farms, Brenda. She actually printed them. She printed out everything and she gave it to the residents there. And she'll pick up everything when it's done, and I'll either go up and pick them up or she'll bring them over to me. And then any of the handwritten ones, then I would input myself, you know, just through the survey monkey. But
You
he's,
have to start announcing public meetings on Facebook.
yeah. I got nothing to say. So, so yes, I think Glenn is very pleased so far. And we have until October 3rd, so it's like 3 weeks left before the survey will be done.
So I like the idea of bumping it up on the community Facebook page.
I'll bump it.
And it's, you know, I was hoping for another couple of hundred responses. I don't know if that's a sort of pie in the sky.
Well, you know what? I think you might get that. I do. And I think Glenn felt that as well.
Okay. All right, good. And the other thing that I'd like to talk about with regard to the plan of conservation and development is the affordable housing. I know that we got, you know, a 3 or 4 or 7 page document from KAH at the beginning of this process. And I know that Glenn is meeting with representatives of the other stakeholders. So I wonder, Donna, if you would reach out to the people who signed the letter. So that's Hal Cam and Bill Backrack and
Greg Sheridan.
Greg Sheridan, and find out who of them should be communicating with Glenn now that the person who put together the previous document is maybe not at the forefront of the movement anymore.
From what I have heard, well, there's a couple of things. I think you have to make a determination as to whether or not you want the affordable housing plan tied into your plan of conservation and development. And the reason that I say that is because the affordable housing plan needs to be updated every 5 years. Your plan of conservation and development only needs to be updated every 10.
I think they have to be 2 separate things. We're
You
working on the
you can tie
POCD
that-
now.
You can tie it into your plan of conservation and development if you want, if you wish to do so.
No, I'm saying that I don't wish to do so.
Right, and I
No.
agree with that. I don't think that that's what you want to do at all.
Right. No, I didn't mean to say that it has to be separate. I want it to be separate. I don't think it's appropriate that it's tied into the POCD.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. And I think that Glenn might have already reached out to them. I'm not sure.
Okay, but I'd like to be sure that, you know, Bill made a pretty they all have over the last couple of months made some pretty strong comments, and I want to make sure that that their hopes and desires and requirements regarding the general statutes are somewhat incorporated into the plan of conservation and development insofar as the community believes that they should be, and insofar as the state mandates them to be. I would also like some information from Kent Affordable Housing as to why their plan for the 6 units at Kent Green fell through. So I think that I think if the Kent Affordable Housing is looking to us to enforce the affordable housing, if they're looking to us to be the ones who are the gatekeepers, then I would like their input as a partner as to what they're doing. But as I said earlier, I think this is a perfect opportunity now to reinvigorate the discussion on affordable housing, because we are in the process of rewriting plan conservation development, and the selectmen are putting together, hopefully they have put together and have started to work with their subcommittee on the creation of the affordable housing plan.
I don't think they have. What I heard today at the COG meeting was that they were waiting for their funding to come through for the grant to hire a consultant to write the plan.
Okay. And I will say one last thing for the record, that the Planning and Zoning Commission has always supported affordable housing in town.
I think the town's done a good job, and I think affordable housing has done a good job. I mean, I've lost track of how many units they have, but I think we're way ahead of majority of towns. So I don't think, I think we've done I think the town of Kent has done a very good job with that.
When they were doing the whole desegregate Connecticut hearings, I listened to a couple of them. And one of the messages that kept being repeated over and over and over again was that a 10% requirement for affordable housing is unattainable in the northwest and the northeast corners of Connecticut. And that based on town size, that percentage should be adjusted so that it would be easily attainable. But it was something the first selectman from the northeast corner, I think he's the selectman of like 6 or 7 separate towns, had come forward with some very good strategies for changing the percentages, and for the reason why a flat 10% just doesn't work throughout the entire state. And that if they really wanted to push so that the smaller towns would have affordable housing, they would have to reconsider the requirements for the smaller towns with the smaller populations, with the areas that don't have the infrastructures that's required, as far as public transportation and the railroads and jobs. It's not something that he felt. And I understood exactly the rationale that he was using. So it was a very interesting concept, and hopefully that's something that's going to change, is actually that percentage. So
with the goal being that's the understanding being that's we should be supportive, and maybe even more than just supportive of affordable housing. But with that in the plan of conservation and development, it can steer the regulations, which can help us steer the applications. Okay. Anything else on the plan of conservation and development?
No, the next meeting is October something, 21st, I think. No, I'm away.
It's the second Thursday. It's 6 o'clock on the meeting.
Right?
Yeah, same meeting night.
Because
What
That'll be a
meeting?
fun night too.
What meeting is that you're talking
the Plan of Conservation and Development Subcommittee meeting.
about? Oh, the subcommittee. Okay.
Yep.
Karen, you gonna be ready for that? An extra hour? Okay, so administrative permits, this is agenda item 9A. Permits and certificates of compliance. Any questions or comments?
Oh, it was a busy month. Busy.
Busy. It's Connecticut Federation of Planning and Zoning Agencies quoted in the newsletter, summer 21.
Yeah, this is a good one because it talks about the legislation that just went into effect. So if you want to give it a gander, it's really very well written.
We have to decide what we're going to opt out of.
Yes, that's the next thing. Once I get the public hearing set up for the cannabis, then we have to start looking at on what we want to opt out of. And we also have to look at outdoor seating for restaurants, because what's in effect right now, because of COVID, it's still in place where they can only have 50% of the outdoor seating of what they're allowed to have on the indoor, as long as they meet the 6-foot distancing, which a couple of places are not doing right now. But that ends March 31st. April 1st, the new regulation, the new legislation kicks in, and we need to change our regulations to be in sync with that as well. So that'll be the next one that I'll be working on.
Hey, Donna, could you put together, I don't want all those things on the agenda, but could you put together a running list of the things that we have open that we need to keep our finger on the pulse of?
Yep.
All right, great. And then 9C is the advisement of public hearing on September 2nd regarding the proposed pavement rehabilitation of Bullsbridge Road.
Yeah, that meeting was already held, but it was a requirement that we are notified that they were going to be doing that. And basically, Rick had gotten money from the state for what they call connector roads to repair them. So they decided that, and a connector road is going from one state road to another state road. So they looked at Bullsbridge Road. The plan is to repair Bullsbridge Road from the intersection of South Kent Road to just past or up to the maintenance building for Bullsbridge Golf Course, just past Old Stone Road. So they're going to be resurfacing that, filing wetlands permits because there's wetlands there, fixing some of the culverts. And this was a package deal that came out of the DOT for the state of Connecticut. And as part of that process, planning and zoning needed to be notified of. So that's the official note.
Okay. And I would suggest that we look at to leave 9D on the agenda for next month. I'll take a look at the annual monitoring report and see whether I have any questions or comments. I just didn't look at that before tonight. And then agenda items 10 and 11. Do we need to go into executive session regarding High Watch and the Roberti Family LLC?
I don't think so. Just simply to say that Mike has filed a response that was filed last Friday. I've not heard anything else since then.
So we as we said last month, we're continuing along with the status quo.
Yep.
With the course that we had established prior.
Yep.
Okay, well, we made it under 4 hours.
Matt, can I extend it just 2 minutes? I was just looking at this and thinking the discussion on Club Getaway, and basically we're dealing with change of use and definition. How come that doesn't apply to the work of Architectural Review Board? And I'm thinking of something like the Morrison Gallery, which presented something initially. Time goes by and then it changes. And the only people that have to approve that change is the Architectural Review Board. How come it doesn't come back to us, or why we don't?
It did, and it should. So
did?
the architecture review board is a segment. It's an arm of, or a subcommittee almost of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
I don't remember discussing the change. I remember discussing that one window that wasn't very long ago.
Right, and
But-
that's what
But
it
that
was. So
wasn't the only change, was it? That
They-
one,
They removed the second story, they removed the
yeah.
clear story windows, and that came back as well.
They made a lot of changes. There was significant
that's
changes.
my point is there are a lot of changes and I only recall that window and this, and that second story. But
yeah, so if I
everything
remember right, Alice, they came to us. I'm sorry to interrupt. They came to us with a two-tiered. The first plan was a low roof and then a step back to an upper roof with a second floor. And then they came. So that was the first one that we approved. The
Right.
architecture review board said
Right.
that's great.
Right.
And then they came back to us and said we can't afford the upper roof, so we're going to square everything up, but we're gonna make the front entrance a little bit fancier. We're gonna make this window a little fancier. And does that work? And we said the commission that came to us, and the commission said, okay, but go talk to the review board.
I must have been asleep through that one. I don't remember that.
It was like 11:30 at night, Alice.
Sorry, I just all of a sudden, to me, it went from here to here, and to me, they don't look anything alike as I remember them. So,
And to me,
But I'm
they
not
don't
on
look
architect-
any different.
what?
To me, it doesn't look any different, with the exception of the second story.
Oh,
Everything
well,
else
there
to
you
me
go.
looks
Then
exactly the
it's-
same. I mean, they extended out the connector from the front building to the back building, and they came for that as well, so.
Okay, never mind. Time to go home.
Apologies, can I take another minute?
Yes.
The conservation overlays, if I recall, those were put in place to encourage developers to conserve open space and rewarding them with an extra lot or some other calculation. That was the original intent behind the overlays?
The conservation subdivision?
For like the VR2, the conservation subdivision. I thought it was an overlay, maybe I misinterpreted it, but is it a completely separate zoning than VR2 is now?
It's actually a whole new section in the VR2. So it's a conservation subdivision special permit. But then there
Okay.
is a conservation overlay district in the rural district.
Oh, so that's what the overlay. I just wonder for the subdivision that they're proposing, do they have to do the conservation subdivision? They could just do a regular old
They
subdivision.
could if they wanted to, yeah, but they didn't
Okay.
want to.
Yeah, I was just trying to understand if there's some reason or that they could just build a regular old subdivision there and go through the process and there'd be
Right.
nothing stopping them. Okay. I
You
just
know,
want to make sure.
I mean, I understand the people's, questioning. I get what they're saying, but one of the things that they're not looking at is if they move everything to the back, now their impact is going to be on the Housatonic River.
Oh, it's huge. Yeah, there's a giant slope there. Yeah, I looked at the topo. It would be, yeah, you'd be building
Matt is
terrace.
hanging his head saying, please shut up.
No. That's not what I mean at all. I don't mean to give that impression. No. I agree with that. I agree with the conversation because without really saying it, we could have 19 lots there in whatever configuration they wanted them without any open space. With that, then they could do that. I mean, it's still a special permit, but they could do it almost by right.
Yes, that was my understanding of the regulations as well. Because I wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something.
Yeah.
Yay.
Okay, still under 4 hours.
10:59, quick. Somebody motion to close.
So thanks everybody for your patience. I know it was a long meeting. I suspect that the meeting next month is going to be long as well. So eat your Wheaties, get a good night's sleep the night before. Hopefully you can sleep in a little bit tomorrow.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.